Okay, I want to welcome everyone to our February 11th, 2019 City Council work session. The time now is 6:05. We're beginning with our Visitors and Citizens Forum, and the first person requesting to speak is John Summers regarding reinstatement. Welcome, Mr. Summers, and if you would, please just state your name for the record. Just if you would, just state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is John Summers. I'm the lieutenant here with the Haltom City Fire Department. My name is John Summers. I'm a lieutenant here with the Haltom City Fire Department. I'm going to have to kind of wing this. I ran off and left my printed off paper at home, so y'all kind of bear with me. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and citizens. My name is Lieutenant John Summers. I live at 214 Meadowbrook Lane in Keller, Texas. I've been a member of the Haltom City Fire Department since 1989, when I became an explorer with post number 505. I was 15 years old. After putting myself through EMT school and graduating from the Fire Academy on June 26, 1996, I became a paid member of the Haltom City Fire Department. In June will be 23 years of paid service to the city. In total, that's 30 years of service to the city of Haltom City. As all of you are aware, I'm in the middle of a situation with my current employer, the Haltom City Fire Department. My employment was terminated with the city in early February 2017. Following the Haltom City Charter, I filed an appeal to the wrongful termination under Chapter 11 of that city charter. My termination was overturned by a unanimous vote of 3-0. The appeal for the hearing drug on past the 30-day limit that is set in the city charter. The city had filed a request with the commission for an extension, which was granted. In total, I was off the job and unable to serve the citizens of this community for 18 months. It's a year and a half. This time off cost the taxpayers a very large sum of money due to the city having to back pay me when I came back to work, and they also had to pay overtime to fill my position for that 18 months I was off work. The week prior to my civil service hearing, the city administration promoted a lieutenant into the spot that had been vacated by my termination. My position had been left vacant for the 8 months prior to that. Why would the city administration promote someone into a position the week before a hearing that would ultimately result in the employee being returned back to work? I think the city knew I was going to get my job back, and they were setting things up to make sure I did not get back on the fire truck. My hearing was finally conducted at the Haltom City Civic Center in late September 2018. The hearing lasted 3 days. At the conclusion of day 2, one of the 2 complaints made against me were unfounded and unsubstantiated by the commission and were dismissed in whole, without a single witness from my side even being called to testify. On the last day of the hearing, just as I did 18 months prior, when I was put on administrative leave, I took full responsibility for using foul language inside the firehouse. I was the only person called to testify on my behalf. After deliberation, the Civil Service Commission ruled to reinstate my employment minus 3 months of back pay. Nowhere does it mention reassigning me to a different function. The commission also ordered that I be given leadership training. Approximately 1 week after this hearing, I met with the Fire Chief, Perry Bynum. The Fire Chief gave me a packet titled Civil Service Commission Directives. He advised me that my reinstatement requirements were listed out in that document. I have completed everything in that document that I can do. I've met all the requirements of this document, and I've passed all the tests that have been asked of me. It was during this meeting that the Fire Chief told me I was being reassigned to the Fire Marshal's office and that I would now be working an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday desk job. This job is an inspector position, and at the time, I was not even qualified to hold that position. The lieutenant that was in that position was an inspector. I was not being reinstated, rather, I was being reassigned to a less desirable position and one that did not allow me to make the same amount of money I was making before I was terminated. Placing me in this position was done to try and force me into retirement. It is 100% retaliation and does not support the relationship-driven management philosophy put in place by city administration. I am being retaliated against for exercising my rights under civil service rules as stated in the city charter and for being awarded my career back. I explained to the chief then and explained to the chief now, as well as the city manager and the HR director, that I want to be returned to the position and schedule that I held prior to my termination. I want to be reinstated, not reassigned. I would ask that the orders of the Civil Service Commission be upheld. I have a pending lawsuit filed against the city asking to be placed back into the position I held prior to my termination. That position was a working supervisor on a fire truck.
You have 2 minutes, Mr.
There is absolute no need in burdening the citizens, the taxpayers, myself, and my family with the pending suit any longer. It has already cost us all way too much money. It is my wish to resolve this without any further litigation and without costing anyone more money. It's time to put this behind us and move forward. The chairman of the Civil Service Board, Mr. Cody Elliott, testified to you all, the City Council, on Monday, January 21st. During his testimony, he explained exactly as to what he felt was to have taken place under the description of reinstatement. He also stated he stated that Mr. Summers was to be reinstated back to working as a lieutenant on a fire squad. Those were quotes. He also stated had he known that the city staff was going to do what they had done in this case, that the commission would have been very exact in wording of the ruling. Mr. Elliott was very clear as to what being reinstated meant to the commission by the commission. After hearing his testimony to you all that night, there is absolute no doubt as to what the commission wanted to take place with me getting back to work. Why send me to 5 months leadership training with no intent of putting me back in a leadership role on a fire truck? I stand before you, the council members, today and ask that you uphold what he testified to, and please reinstate me to the job that I love and allow me to serve all the great citizens of this community in the capacity I was prior to my wrongful termination. I've been in the suppression division of the fire department my entire career. I have absolutely no desire to work in the fire marshal's office. We can put this entire issue to rest tonight. We can stop the fighting. We can stop wasting my money. We can stop wasting the citizens' money. And we can put that money to use in far better ways to help this community. Thank you very much for y'all's time.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. The next speaker's request form is to discuss Fathom. Darlene, and I can't pronounce the last name. Daryl?
Good old Irish name, yes, sir.
Okay, if you would please just come up and state your name for the record, please. Darlene Daryl. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Even though it's raining, I'm glad to be here this evening, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I used to do this fairly well because it was part of what I did for a living. I don't speak in public very often anymore, so if I resort to my notes, I hope you'll understand. I have a question before I proceed. I want to know if there's some kind of action right now that's happening to stop Fathom from holding water clients hostage, because that's what they're doing to me, or at least that's what they're trying to do. I have had in the last 60 days 2 notices that water to my home was going to be cut out. In October this year, I will have lived in the Browning Heights Division for 50 years. I don't know how many, I can't multiply that fast, but I don't know how many months that involves, but every single month, I have paid the water utility on time. But still, I'm sent these notices. I was raised at a time when you pay your bills, you honor your obligations. I've always done that. I don't like being told that I'm in arrears when I'm not, especially by some snot-nosed brat that doesn't know his rear end from a hole in the ground. I'm tired of this nonsense. I've had it up to here. I don't want it anymore. This outfit is working on a 28-day cycle for billing. Even banks do it by the month. Their banking is by the month because, heavens above, it makes sense. It has common sense. If you have something that's due on the 5th of the month, you can count on that happening month after month after month. If you have it every 28 days, some months you get charged twice. because the 28 days rolls around before the first of the month when many people get paid. A lot of people still get paid on the 1st and the 15th of the month. I don't happen to do that. As you may have noticed, I'm a little older. My paychecks come the 1st of the month. I'm working half days at my age because I need to in order to assure that I won't become a public charge when I get older, if I get older. And I always laugh and joke and say that I'm not stepping out in front of a Twinkie truck to find out if it's my time, but none of us have any control over that. And so the time that's left to me, I don't want to spend it arguing with people who don't have any better sense than to use a 28-day payment cycle when it causes people all this problem. You send me that trash, the first thing I want to do is go punch somebody in the nose. Hey, I paid my bill. In December, on the 9th, I went down to the office here, and I spoke with Tracy, and I said, why do I have this? I've paid my bills. Here, I showed her. I have my confirmation numbers, because I keep records. I keep a lot of records. I know when I did what I did, and I paid the bill. Oh, it's all right, Miss Darrell, don't worry about it. We have your file marked, don't send out any warnings. Why is that? Well, no answer. And I hadn't really called to raise Cain. I just had called and asked that the billing be such that it would fall within the 1st to the 10th of the month so that I could pay it, because that's my pay period. That's what my budgeting allows for. Okay, that's fine. And then I had no sooner got home, like 2 days later, and I had another bill. So it isn't just the 28-day billing period that is a problem. These people do a shortfall bill every once in a while. And if it was just 1 or 2 of us, it wouldn't make that much difference. But it makes a lot of difference when they apply 8 cents per gallon to your usage because they have read the meter earlier this time, and by doing that, you don't have the same usage that you had the month before. Well, of course not. I don't know where the money's going, but there was a movie that had that line, follow the money. It's wrong. Is anybody doing anything to stop these people from running over the people of this community? Because if they are, I'm not seeing any of it. Of course, I'm not looking. I expect you folks to do your job like I'm expected to do mine. And I'm tired of having to follow up behind a lot of people, not just here, but a lot of things. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but with the exception of an exchange of cash money at the site of a purchase, and considering that you're working with a cashier that actually knows how to make change, which is a miracle in itself, you cannot finish one transaction at one time. You are bound up in a wad of string that ties you to this thing for weeks and weeks because nobody ever reaches the end of anything. Can we please find a way to come to an end of this situation with Fathom? I don't know what your contractual requirements are. I don't know if you have an oversight committee, but boy, those people are making off like bandits. 28-day billing cycle, charging on a shortfall like they do for the water. I'm not just one old person. This community is full of old people. And a lot of them don't have the gumption that I've got. Of course, I was taught to fight when I was a kid. You take up for yourself and everybody else. And I'm still trying to do that. So I hope that you'll do something. I'm tired of being lied to by that company. And I'm really tired of them taking advantage of all of us. And that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm surprised that nobody has seen anything or done anything about it yet. So I thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your attention more than you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Darrell. Just in answer to your question, we have had an audit report, and our staff will be presenting that a little later on during the work session. So hopefully that'll answer some of your questions.
An audit report, does that mean there's going to be some kind of action to stop this nonsense from them?
Well, this will be information provided to us and also to the citizens as well. So we'll just have to wait and see what the recommendations are. Thank you, ma'am.
And we also went to a standard billing cycle instead of the 28-day billing cycle that started this month.
Right,
So-
right. Thank
So
you.
the 28-day cycle's over.
Oh, thank you very much.
So,
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Gross.
so that's very effective speech. Thank you.
The next speaker's request is Mr. Trey Fowler. Welcome, sir. And again, if you would just state your name for the record.
May I approach?
Sure. And 6 minutes, Mr. Fowler, and I'll alert you at 2 when you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'd planned on talking about discretionary funding on completing, potentially finishing maybe the lawsuit that Dr. Trong had talked about, how we're don't have a lot of money in the city and we need to use it wisely. And I was, going to talk about that, but I was approached just a moment ago by Mr. Camacho, our city secretary. I brought a formal complaint up today that I also delivered to Chief Jacobs' office that I'd intended to try to handle discreetly, but obviously the city manager has asked that it not be given to the city council members for some reason. So I've distributed it to you now, and y'all may read it, but then I'm going to go ahead and read it here also, if that's okay, Mayor.
Yes, sir. You have 6 minutes.
And I hate to do this because I'd not intended to overstep what I felt like was a good chain of command, but obviously we're not. If we're going to try to suppress things and keep them covered up, then, I'm not for that. So, January 29th, 2019, Chief Jacobs. I'm writing to file a formal complaint regarding an incident that took place on Sunday, January 27th, located near the BISD Administration Building, 6125 East Belknap Street, at the BISD football field. The incident took place approximately 12:29 p.m. Preceding that time, I passed by the BISD football field and noticed what seemed to be a touch football game between Haltom City Fire Department members. Our public servants were playing on a field where there are clearly marked signs of no trespassing at the facility, but I continued to my destination. The return trip back to my residence, same route by the BISD field, I noticed a surprising number of Haltom City fire apparatus, 1 engine and 2 ladder trucks, parked in an unusual manner. In addition to the Haltom City fire apparatuses, surprisingly there was a battalion chief's vehicle, 3 Haltom City Police Department units, and a MedStar ambulance. Being a concerned citizen, I pulled into the facility and proceeded to the southwest corner of the stadium parking lot to observe and understand the need for such a large presence of our public safety officers. After parking, another patrol unit and another solid black police unit arrived. A short period of time thereafter, the police units and the ambulance left the scene. While there, I thought it might be a novel idea to take some pictures of our public servants in action, as the firemen had returned to the field and resumed their game of touch football. In order to have a better view, I moved my vehicle and parked in the second space from the southeast gate entrance, about 20 to 25 foot from the gate, for an unimpeded view of the ongoing game, to video and photograph our public servants in action. In the process of moving my vehicle, I passed the battalion chief's vehicle exiting from the area. After a few completed plays, I heard an alert, and one of the firemen hustled over to answer the radio. He was on the radio briefly and then asked the other men if anyone had a cell phone. He took a phone and made or received a call to someone. While talking on the phone, he frantically started looking around the stadium. After making a 180-degree turn, he identified my presence. I waved to the gentleman and continued my footage. He then spoke to some of the fellow firefighters, and they gathered their personal effects to exit the field. As the men were exiting the gate, a highly offensive expletive comment was directed towards me by Mr. Chris Buck, Haltom City Fire Department firefighter. Mr. Buck said, and I won't say it in front of the audience, but it's F-U-C-K, Fowler, which I clearly heard as they exited. I'm in the construction industry and hear language like this in the field frequently. However, the expletive language used against me as a private citizen by a public servant is far beneath the level of integrity that you as chief and the large majority of dedicated public servants model in your department. As a lifelong resident, volunteer, public servant, and taxpayer in the Haltom City community, at a minimum,
2 minutes left, Mr. Fowler.
At a minimum, myself as well as any citizen or taxpayer should expect decorum and professional conduct from all public servants who work for you as a chief and primarily the public. This disrespectful conduct is now carried into social media regarding this incident specifically, and seems to be a matter of childish disrespect towards me, a private citizen, not to mention the disrespect and personal attacks directed toward other Haltom City residents. Unfortunately, this has become commonplace, and our public servants are now emboldened to engage in such highly unprofessional behavior. If this reflects what is being instilled and supported by leadership in the city, verbal attacks against private citizens are now acceptable as part of the relationship-driven management philosophy. This is concerning. You as chief and the department as a whole act and display high integrity to the community. Therefore, I am encouraged and this matter will be investigated and dealt with in a fair and judicial manner.
1 minute, Mr. President.
Once again, congratulations on your new appointment. I look forward to the expeditious resolution and disturbing of this disturbing incident and behavior by this public servant. So, I'd not intended to say this. I distributed it to Mr. Camacho in order for him to give to the council members so they would know, and I sent it to Chief Jacobs today. Actually, didn't even give it to the battalion chief, asked it to be put in an envelope. But when you can't even give you guys a piece of information or literature, it's getting to the point of ridiculous. Y'all need to know what's going on. It's not right for these people to act like this, period. No matter who you are. I spoke last meeting, and it doesn't matter whether you like someone or dislike someone. You should at least have a certain level of respect. It's not being followed. It's being allowed to act like this, for these people to act and display themselves in public like this. It needs to be looked into. It needs to be, and I do after having an hour and 15-minute conversation with Chief Jacobs, I do expect, and I feel like he will do his best to make sure that this thing is at least looked into and dealt with fairly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to offer a factual response to that. We don't hand out employee complaints to the city council. That's not how it's handled. The due process is that employee complaints come to the director of the employee first. So we don't, for you to ask the city secretary to hand that complaint to the city council is not, it's improper. That's not the way it works, because this is not due process. The due process is, you just said you felt comfortable that the chief would follow up on it. That's the due process for employees.
Thank you, sir. With seeing no other speaker requests, okay. If you would state your name for the record, please.
5708 Briarcliff Road.
6 minutes, Mr. Hudson.
Okay. It won't take me that long. I just want to follow up on what Mr. Summers had said just a little while ago. I would like to see our council make a decision on what has been recommended by, or what has been stated by the Civil Service Commission. I've talked with several of the council members, and they have expressed that they too see that there's an issue with what reinstatement is and reassignment is. There's two different things. I would ask y'all to take a look at John's record. Take a look at what the Civil Service Commission asked be done. Take a look at that, and y'all make a decision. Save the taxpayers some money. It's a burden for the taxpayers to continue to spend money to fight a fight that the decision has already been made. And I think Cody spoke a few weeks ago, passed that along. I would ask that y'all take a look at it tonight, even in the executive session. Somebody make a decision to move forward with this thing and be done with it. Stop the bleeding for the citizens. They have enough burdens as it is already. So we're looking at y'all to make a decision, move forward with this thing, and make the right decision based on what y'all put people in a position to make that decision and enforce what the Civil Service Commission has asked y'all to do. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other speaker request cards, we'll move right along to the Fathom Audit Report. Our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Rex Phelps.
Yes, sir. Well, this is in accordance to the direction that the council gave staff, and we took bids and selected a company that would come in and do an independent investigation of the Fathom billing platform, and so that's what they're here tonight to do. From UtiliWorks here is Mr. Gary Mann, project manager and senior consultant, Don Rinkin, senior consultant, and Nicole Griffin, senior manager, Nicole Griffin. So this is a work session. It just, wasn't meant to have a decision making. It's just to give you guys a preliminary report today, and they will soon be coming back with the final report. The purpose of this meeting is to give you their findings thus far, and then gain feedback from council. Now, it should be noted and said that staff is completely stayed out of this. We do have a liaison, Sedona Faust, who answered the questions when UtiliWorks would have them, or questions. And so from that point, I guess the best thing to do is turn it over now to UtiliWorks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. If we can jump over to the PowerPoint, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and do a very brief introduction of UtiliWorks Consulting, and then I'm going to pass it over to Don Rankin, who's going to go through the preliminary findings from the report. So going through our agenda, again, a brief introduction will be had, then we'll discuss the purpose timeline of this project, of this effort, then diving into the meter testing findings, from there looking at the meter reading accuracy, then lastly, the billing audit itself, and of course, open time for questions. So rolling into the next slide here, a little bit of background on UtiliWorks Consulting. We are a professional services firm founded in 2005 to address the advanced metering and related technologies market. So that is really the niche and the exclusive focus of the company. We've got 85 past and current projects. The vast majority of those are municipal utility projects located within the United States. Additionally, we are recognized as an industry expert. We speak routinely at many major conferences, AWWA included. We almost always have somebody at ACE and whatnot. Additionally, we're a small but highly focused company with very experienced personnel. So our staff who's here have utility background as well. Many of our employees held the position as a utility director or something of that nature. And one of the last things I just wanted to point out as well is we are vendor agnostic. So while we've seen this technology, we've seen technology all across the board for the major AMI providers. We have no affiliation with any of them. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Don Rankin.
How do you do? Thank you for having us here this evening. I'd like to start with just talking a little bit. We were hired by the city to evaluate the billing and the metering assets for the city to identify errors in the system. The timeline, we started on site with Sedona and the staff of the city in November of 2018. And tonight we have the preliminary report. Meter testing. We tested initially 40 meters and then eventually a total of 65 meters out of the roughly 13,000 population that you have. The meters are both Neptune and Badger meters. We tested both about a 70-30 split so that we had a very good representation of the meter population. The testing was done by Tribus Services. We contracted with them directly through UtiliWorks. They're a certified lab. They tested to the American Water Works. It's a standard testing procedures on a bench, a certified bench to laboratory standards. And they do the testing in the low range, a medium range, and a high range of flow. And basically, the meter has to be within 1.5% of the flow range. These are the results of that testing, 0%, and I think, this is, given the issues that we're looking at here, that we were called in anyhow, is identified 0% of the meters that were tested were over-registering. None of them were registering more water than what went through the meter. There were some failures, though. They were in the low flow range, 83% of them in that low flow range, which indicates that the meter is under-registering water there. So the medium flow was 100% of them registered. There were 3 of them slightly low, and the high flow were registered slightly below, 5 of them slightly below, and then 1 of them was actually far out of range at only about 72%. Accuracy. This is a very busy slide, but and I'm not going to talk into the details of it, but I did want to have it handy in case somebody was very interested in some of these details. But meters, when you read a meter, one of the things I look for when we go through and do the billing accuracy is to identify how many digits are being read on the meter. It's very common. Utilities will read various amounts of digits. They'll bring them into the billing system and they'll put a multiplier to them, and this is a common error that I'll find across the nation, different utilities that we visit. The city used initially was using a 5-digit reading, which meant they had 100 multiplier, and the new system that they put in actually reads down to the gallon. So it's a gallon resolution. And essentially, when I went through all of the data of the 40 meters reviewed, none of them had any errors in the accuracy of the meters. Okay, the billing audit. I want to talk just a little bit about this because I take the data that the staff gives me. This is data out of your billing system. It tells, it has the consumption and various attributes of each one of the accounts, and then I put it into a data visualization software where I recreate and show, can see it in a graphical form, which we'll see in just a minute. So the meters, one of the items I wanted to point out here, though, is that the meters, excuse me, on average were 30 years old. I also study quite a bit about meter accuracy, the various tests that are done. None of the tests look at meters 30 years old. That's outside of the normal range. So these are very old meters. So if I was replacing these meters, I would expect to find numerous meters very much under registering. Okay, once again, I was talking that I use a data visualization software. This is a little bit of an output from that. Basically, I'd like to talk about this one just a little bit. The blue bars that you see on the left, that is the time period when, for these 40 customers, that the city was billing those customers. They're shown in blue. The orange is the period of time when Fathom started doing the billing. And so generally I will put together on the population of the data, I'll take a look at what has occurred during that time and make some observations. The observations from this is that during the crossover time, when Fathom picked up the billing in January of 2018, I see there's no appreciable difference between that time period and the January time period when the city was billing. They're very similar. The new meters were installed for these 40 accounts. All but 2 of them were installed in the March and April time frame. So I put the line on the bottom of the chart there. It says new meters. That's when the bulk of the meters were installed. Another item that's telltale sign of this is that immediately afterwards, I do not see a major increase in consumption. Now, the summertime usage, when you get into the June, July, August time frame, the consumption jumped up considerably. And so, but one of the telltale signs of this is that the post-summer consumption, this is basically a typical pattern that I would expect to see at a utility that replaced very old meters. And the customers basically over the summertime would experience very high usage that they were not used to, and then they would compensate and start using a lesser amount of water. This chart, the other thing I just want to say is that this is the 40 on aggregate, and so what I'm generally looking for when I look at a larger group is I'm looking for a systemic type problem. Is there something that's being done wrong for all of the customers as a whole? So we'll take a look here. I also went through then every single account and reviewed those. It's a similar graphic where it's basically the blue bars on the left are representing the consumption when the city was doing the billing. The red bars on the right represent the time when Fathom was doing the billing. And then the little diamonds probably should have been a different color, but that's the time when the new meter was installed. So I did see this on a number of them where the consumption after Fathom started billing was comparable, indicating the billing was being done properly. But at the time the new meter was installed, I see a rise in consumption and the pattern changes. Okay, and then it's also a common is that in the October and the November timeframe, the consumption jumps down. Once again, that's very consistent with a new meter installation where the customers have been used to a certain consumption pattern. Now they have a new meter, they experience a very high usage, and the consumption comes back down as they adjust. This one's another one. This one I did look into quite a bit of detail, and simply because when you see, normally I'm looking for a problem that occurred after some change. You guys had the new billing system, you had the new AMI system, and then you had the new meters. And so I was pointedly looking for those types of issues. In this particular item, I was looking for, was there an error prior to Fathom even being with the city? Was there an error that simply propagated through? I chose this one because it had a very high usage consistently. This customer is up over 30,000 gallons in the summer months. This is prior to Fathom being here. And you can see it culminated in August of as high as 80,000 gallons. That's extreme water usage. So I put on the bottom here is just a reference. These are what I would consider to be high. The source of this was USGS. You go to different sources and they all have something different. What I was used to is 80 to 100 gallons per month per person. So that's generally with 2,500 to 3,000 gallons a month is what I'm used to. The USGS source actually rules in outdoor watering without pools or spas. And so they say one person, 9,150, a four-person home, 15,000 gallons. You can see this particular home was using up over 30,000 gallons during the summer months. So what I did with this one was I put it through where I basically divide the consumption by 10. The consumption, and then a lot of that I'm looking for a reasonableness test. The consumption was reasonable. In other words, this was a potential where there was a multiplier of 10 issue. But as we went through the data, looked in the billing, looked on the meter, there were no, all the multipliers were 1 and not 10. I saw no evidence of any errors or problems as an outcome of this. Simply wanted to demonstrate that it was one of the tests that was performed, actually on all of the accounts. So here the conclusions are, from the meter reading accuracy, the meter reading accuracy as goes through the billing is accurate. It's down to 1 gallon. It's actually more accurate now. I think the readings, you guys used to bill in 100 gallons. It's now read to the gallons. I don't think for any of the customers that are having high bills, I don't think that part makes any difference whatsoever. The meter accuracy that was read when we did the test, none of them, probably most significantly, none of these are over-registering water. They're not measuring more water than what actually went through them. In fact, a number of them were under-registering the water in the low flow range. The billing system, I don't see any evidence that the Fathom billing is incorrect. It in fact appears to be correct at every single account that I looked at. The new meters, the new meters registered higher but accurate consumption. I felt compelled to put this in. Some consumptions are excessively high. Being a previous director of a utility, and I dove into this issue considerably. You know, these are some of the places I would actually go out and physically visit and just keep track until I could try to find some reason. But these are very high consumptions on a couple of the accounts. But the fact is, I had those in the utilities I managed also. We had customers that simply used that much water. The billing period, confusing. I've heard since we've come here that apparently has been fixed. I think that creates confusion in the billing. It creates confusion actually as I'm putting the visualization together because I have to put it on some time frame. That's all I had for that portion. Do we want to show the video?
We have a council member with one question. Dr. Trung?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I want to clarify a couple things here. Are you employed with Fathom?
No. No, I'm employed with UtiliWorks Consulting.
Okay.
I have no association.
That means you not get paid from Fathom at all?
No, no.
Right. I want the
not.
customer out there know that you're not talking for Fathom and you are employee of them.
Certainly.
That's the one thing I want to point out.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, they're an independent third party.
And we do have a short video that will kind of demonstrate what you had out in the field as far as an old mechanical meter, what you
Here.
currently now have.
Here.
So we do have a short video that we created in the field, and we did this as UtiliWorks, as the independent consultant. We went out to the field. There was a specific account that was identified that had a water leak. So what we were able to do, we were actually able to do a visual on the actual old meter with the consumption, with water actually flowing from a spigot. We'll show that meter was not actually capturing that water flow. During that same time frame, we left that water running, but changed that meter to the new iPearl meter that you currently have in the ground. That's solid state, and you'll see a difference here as you'll run this, please. So there was a public works discovered that Hamilton and Haltom had an issue, and then the employee noticed that there was a leak and not registering the water usage, so the old meter was taken out and new ones installed. So the leak was fixed. You'll see a simulation conducted, and the simulation shows an older meter against the new meter and how it all works. So this is a UtiliWorks employee, and this is the old meter that's in the ground. Now you can see right there that that dial is not moving at all, so it's not registering any consumption. You'll see here when we focus on the house, you'll see that there's a trickle coming out of a spigot here in just a second. And the trickle just as small as this. I mean, this is a type of water flow that we want to make sure that we're capturing. You know, ultimately, you know, as a city utility, you want to make sure what you're getting out as production through distribution, you're covering your production, distribution, consumption, all the way to billing. So here we are just changing the meter out. So this is the new meter that's in the ground. This is the flow indicator. You see right there, we started picking up usage right away on the new meter. So whatever it was trickling there that you saw from the house, the old meter was not capturing that. It was just running into the earth. The new meter now, you can see the flow. It's the same flow. We're able to capture that data. So this is just trying to identify the better accuracy of the meters compared to the old meters that were in the ground. You know, as far as having misregistration on the new meters, it's not highly likely, and having the bills being higher. But that's just one piece that we put together here, just kind of as a visual, just to show old to new. Kind of gives you a good idea of what's going on out in the field. Again, this is all kind of preliminary. We'll be back here with the more in-depth findings once we finalize all of our testing that we're going to do here for the city of Haltom. And now that we have Nicole Griffin, she's going to come up and do a short presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. So to follow on to that, I wanted to go through our public awareness, discovery, and recommendations for you all. So our findings here, UtiliWorks Consulting conducted a short discovery exercise to understand public perception and employee engagement here at Haltom City. A few of the things that we noted was that Fathom came on board January 2018, so a little over a year, to provide staff augmentation for meter reading and billing functions. Additionally, we noted that employee engagement was fairly limited. There was training conducted. And then lastly here, and this is something that I did want to emphasize, prior to going live with the new systems, there were multiple channels and outreach activities that took place from our understanding. So some of them being an announcement in the Crossroads magazine, public meeting at town hall, participation at events, a new website was launched. We had an information video, Facebook postings as well, so we had some social media presence, door hangers that were left at the customer premise, letters that were mailed to customers, and then lastly, conversations with customers being both over the phone and in person. So there was a lot of due diligence in these outreach efforts, and this is inclusive of the meter upgrades as well as the new customer portal outreach for that. And continuing on, customer feedback, we were made aware was virtually non-existent from those outreach efforts. We did not get a lot of feedback coming back in response to those letters and different outreach efforts that took place during that time. However, there was an influx in customer complaints from February to June 2018, and more so kind of in the latter of that time frame. A couple reasons possible for why that may be: record heat events, things of that nature. And then additionally, a couple other findings. We did note a number of news articles cited on high water bills, metering, and Fathom, kind of mentioning those different keywords in there. And while a lot of the news articles, the negative attention on the news articles has died down, it does appear to be quite prevalent still in social media postings. And then the last item there, I realize it is looking like it's cutting off on the screen a little bit, but customer reviews. So when we did some searches on Haltom City, utility, billing, Fathom, some of those keywords, the reviews were quite negative, rating about a star when you look at Google, Yelp, things, those types of criteria. All right, so moving on to some of the recommendations that we have. One is really to focus attention now, kind of turning a page and focusing attention not on what's been done in the past, but really all of the efforts that are being done now to enhance customer service, to provide some improvements there. So a few points on that too is that local connection with the walk-in facility here with Fathom and the call center now being here in Haltom City. I think that local presence is quite positive. Additionally, that Haltom City is working diligently to keep costs as low as possible for customers, understanding that was one of the reasons to bring Fathom on board in the first place, was to try to keep costs as low as possible for customers here. And then the next recommendation is to communicate the benefits from an advanced metering infrastructure system. There's tremendous benefits with this technology. I have a few of the highlights noted here, and that's something I would really impress that should be communicated throughout the community and to the leadership team and to the constituents as a whole, is that moving forward with this technology is progressive. It's modernizing the infrastructure that you have, and there's a wealth of benefits in doing that. So one of the things too is the customer portal that you have is very robust. It's a powerful tool, and it enables customers to have better control over their usage by being able to see how much water they're using every day, and also setting up alerts so that they can be notified if they're going to exceed their budgetary or usage thresholds that they set for themselves. So that's something that really is quite incredible, and a lot of utilities have not taken it that far yet. Another item is early leak detection. These systems do enable you to be notified if you have continuous consumption, which could be indicative of a leak. It's also a very positive benefit there. And then the third one is tamper and theft detection. These systems will indicate if there's a cut wire or suspect theft occurring. And then the last one here is conservation and greenhouse gas reductions. Since we don't have to drive around from customer premise month by month to capture those meter readings, we have less vehicles on the road, and that reduces greenhouse gas emissions as well. So just a couple of points that are really great benefits that you're already realizing. And then the last one here, not to belabor this too much, but just turning attention to improvements in efficiency, accuracy, and fiscal responsibility. Very good. So recommendations on some next steps from here is, of course, to complete the billing audit presentation to City Council. From there, we would recommend sending a letter out and inviting the customers who participated in the survey, those 40, now I believe about 65 customers who participated in this study, and hosting a focus group with them to really get some honest and accurate feedback on their experience. Do recommend as well that that's a third party that conducts that. We find that the quality of the responses is better, and you get more honest, accurate responses in doing so. And then coming back with that and presenting those findings of that focus group back to you, back to City Council. And kind of to close it out here, to deliver a press release to the news media, being transparent and open in these findings, I think that would bode very well. All right. So one more thing to jump in on here before we're getting close to the end is handling negative feedback on social media, as that is something that does continue to be prevalent. Thinking of social media and doing quite a bit of studies in this area, we recommend thinking of this as a community. Social media is a community with lots of conversations going on at any given point. Some of those are open to the public and would definitely advocate looking for tone and the type of language that's being had out there, and then responding accordingly, of course. But some of those conversations are also private, and in such, not appropriate to be jumping into those conversations or those events. But responding to that negative commentary, it can be very positive if you do a number of different things. So one is acknowledging the concern that the constituent has, providing a solution or resolve, and then also expressing empathy. With inappropriate, abusive, defamatory language, we recommend that you respond briefly and quickly. We also recommend that you delete the post. You say that you'll be doing that, but things may not disappear forever just because you delete them, so you definitely want to respond accordingly. And then cite guidelines wherever possible as well on your codes of conduct. All right, and then a few additional recommendations. Again, jumping back to that customer portal, it's a tremendous tool that the city has and that the customers are able to have access to. So we would recommend having additional avenues so that customers can sign up on that customer portal, and encouraging registration. So the walk-in location that's there, having even a scrolling PowerPoint where they can learn a little bit more about it and sign up right then and there with the assistance of somebody at that facility. That's something that's worked very well in the past from our experience. And then a few other ones here, being prepared to speak to common areas of concern. Accuracy certainly being one of them, and that's not uncommon at all with a meter upgrade. The third bullet here is to create a high-level information piece, and this is really more so of a kind of a full overview education piece to describe how water acquisition and discharge processes take place, including how AMI and meter reading functions for your utility. A lot of times we find customers don't know where their water comes from, or really high level how that whole process takes place. There's a lot involved with that. We know water is a precious commodity, so sometimes just some base education like that can go a long way for appreciation of our water services. And then lastly, kind of rounding it out, is providing additional education throughout this entire effort, and then moving forward to make sure that council and other stakeholders are very well educated, and that you've got open communication channels for any questions that you may have from the public. And then lastly, a little bit further down the road, gathering positive testimonials. Again, I think that portal is a great avenue for that. All the functionality that you have in there is very impressive. And then with that, some open time for questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Grow.
Did you guys get into how the data infrastructure is over at Fathom, how they collect the data from Neptune, how their extract, translate, load process, their database configuration?
No, we did not. we took data extracts out from the portal that the city has through the meter data management system.
But didn't get into the overall infrastructure?
No.
How,
No. But I will say that, I'm used to helping build many of those, and the proof of the pudding is actually looking at the final reads that come out. When you look at the meter, that's generally what we're looking at on when we assist utilities in installing these. We look at what the meter read is, and then we look what the final bill out that's going to go to the customer.
Okay, so you feel confident that the download that they get from Neptune is translated correctly? There's no inserting a rounding error from
No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's not possible.
And okay, you say it's not possible?
Well, I don't. It was not observed in any of the data I saw. So
Okay, that's a lot different than not
Sorry.
possible, because I deal in data, and so I've seen rounding errors and truncation because
Sure.
you don't have enough decimal points, and so something's got to give. On the why did you go from 40 meters to the 65 meters? And because I understand the contract, because there was in the initial, you're going to do 40. If you found that those 40 were inaccurate, you're going to pull 300. So I'm just curious, why did you go to 65? Is it because of the Badgers, to get a mix of the Badgers? Or?
Exactly. We just wanted to get a better mix of exactly what you had out there as far as in the field and service.
And was there any discernible difference between the Neptune meters and the Badger meters? Or do they seem to read the same?
They're very, very close to each other, yes. Very
Okay.
close.
Of the ones that had the low flow, 83% of flow fail, can you give us what were the Badgers and which ones were the Neptunes?
We do have that information, and that will be part of our final write-up and presentation to the City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grove. Are there any other questions or comments for the representatives? Seeing none, okay, thank you.
May I say something?
Oh, Ms. Nunn? Okay, Councilmember Nunn?
I just have just a little clarification. I wrote something down here. You said there were 40 customer accounts audited. Is that the same as the 65 meters with the same customer? I mean, you have 65 meters, right? You would have 60 customers that you look at that information also? The same ones?
we initially, when we came in, we were replacing 40 meters. And so the billing data that was pulled that I looked at and viewed was tied to those. Subsequently, they decided to test additional accounts, the additional 25. We didn't pull the data for that, for the additional 25.
Okay, so I have that the meters were 30 years old on average.
Yes.
But if you also tested the Neptunes, those are brand new. So is that figured in on the average, the Neptunes?
No. No, the 30 years on, those were all the old meters that were replaced as a part of the original project with Fathom. So 30 years old. The new meters that were installed, they were, that we pulled and did the testing on, they were a matter of months old.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nunn. Are there any other questions from the council for either staff or representatives of, you have a question for, okay. Councilman Watkins, you have a question for Mr. Phelps? Or Sedana? Okay.
Did you, you were going to contact one of the other cities that there's a whole bunch of conversation about? Did you get any reply from those?
Well, I mean, from the very beginning to now, I've contacted quite a few cities. Last month, Copper's Cove came and met with us because they're actually wanting to start a payment center like we have. And then today I just asked them, emailed the city manager, are they still in contract? And they said, sir?
You feel comfortable reading that?
Sure. It says, this is from their city manager. Mr. Phelps, since we last met, our relationship and services with Fathom have continued to improve. Last week, Fathom presented their first regular quarterly report update to City Council. Our agreement with Fathom is for a term of 15 years, which began in 2016. The city is currently not planning to terminate our agreement with Fathom, but is committed to working in partnership with Fathom to successfully accomplish the purpose and goals of the agreement. As we were impressed with services provided by Fathom at Haltom City's Payment Center, we are interested in such an arrangement, but have not yet begun that. So I think that since they're moving their call center to the local, like they're doing at us, that's something they're interested in too.
Thank you. The reason I asked, well, you can sit down. I was just going to say the reason I asked, because it was Copper's Cove seemed to have almost identical problems that we had for the first X amount of time, and excuse me. And in the interim, a lot of information was picked up from Copper's Cove, but it was all dated back kind of like when we first started. So being as how that's the one that's mentioned a lot, I was glad when you said that you had been in contact with them.
And they also recently just finished an audit by a different firm, UtiliWorks, and so I did get a little bit of results on that, and it was pretty comparable to what we're hearing tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Watkins. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad you opened it up to staff also. What I'm really interested in, Mr. Phelps or Sedona, how Fort Worth bills us monthly, quarterly, yearly for the water we buy from them?
We're billed monthly for
Okay.
the city of Fort Worth.
Thank you. And then my next question is, how accurate are we? I know at one time with the old meters, there was a big deficit of what Fort Worth billed us and what we were billing our citizens. Have we been able to compare what we're billing and what we're paying Fort Worth? Is that getting closer with the new meters, the more accurate reading?
It is. We're actually working on a detailed analysis with that information right now. We do have the dollar portion of that, which is a huge improvement. We do not have the consumption data compiled to where I can give you the exact amount of gallon difference, but we have seen improvements.
Okay. What would you expect would be, I mean, I know we can't be exactly billed, Fort Worth billing us versus us billing our citizens, our customers. What would be fair? What percentage would you like to get within and feel like that we were doing okay?
I would refer that question to Public Works, being that they do the analysis portion of water loss, and I'm not involved in that piece of it, so Greg or someone with a little more knowledge in that area would be better to answer that question.
Thank you, Sedona, and I sure don't mean to put you on the spot. It's just I would be very interested to see how close we're getting with these new meters of what Fort Worth is billing us and what we're billing our customers. And if someone, if you guys want to gather this and get me the information, I do not want to put anyone on staff on the spot, believe me. I would just like to know that information.
Normally, water loss is about 10 to 15%. That is normal.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Fong?
That is normal, but we're trying to get it to under 10%.
And so far, how are we far as what we're billing our citizens and what we're being billed from Fort Worth? And there again,
it's hard for us to tell right now. We're trying to get the water audit done for this year, and we're trying to get some information from Fathom to be able to do it with STW and Fathom to accumulate it.
Thank you.
Can't tell you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you both. Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Are there any other questions? I know this is for informational purposes, Mr. City Manager, but do you have anything that you would like to follow up with it or anything you'd like to say?
No, sir. As the representatives from UtiliWorks said, they'll be back at a future council meeting to give us a secondary report also.
Well, I want to thank everyone involved in putting this together, and it's an excellent presentation. Well, the time now is 7:08. What we'll do is adjourn this meeting at 7:08, and we'll take about a 10-minute break and then come back for our regular council.
I just have one real quick question.
Yes, sir, Councilman
When can we expect the final report?
I'm sorry.
The final report?
We're scheduled to have this closed out by the end of the month.
Okay.
End of
So of the 25th council meeting? And we'll have it before the council meeting? Okay, thank you.
Okay, the answer to the
And
question.
we'll have it on the 72 hours for our council packets, so we're not getting it on the same day of council meeting?
Make sure you have it.
I appreciate that.
So 72 hours prior to the council meeting on the 25th. Well, we should have the information be made public on the 25th. Okay, and we'll adjourn at, it's 7:10 now, 7:10.
Thank you. I've asked John Valois, a pastor at our Mosaic Ministries at Peace Lutheran Church, to do the invocation. Please rise. Everybody's rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Distinguished Mayor and council members, thanks for the opportunity, and special thanks to Councilman Walter Groh. I promise there's nothing I'm going to say in this prayer today that you will not be able to fathom. Amen. Let's pray. As we bow our heads and close our eyes today, most gracious, into this moment, as this august body of honorable councilmen and women have gathered to deliberate, confer, and decide on issues of monumental importance to the residents of Haltom City. I pray that you will grace them with your presence now, and that you will rain down the kind of inspiration, wisdom, and clarity that can only come from you, O Lord. May the decisions made here today be just, equitable, and honorable in every way and on all counts as it pertains to the lives of those impacted and to the welfare of this resilient city. It is in your name, merciful Jesus, that I pray. And everyone says, Amen. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Moving right along to our announcements and events, our City Secretary, Art Camacho.
Thank you, Mayor. The announcements for February 11th, 2019. In community projects, the Veterans Memorial Committee is still conducting the brick fundraiser to help raise funds for Phase 2, which includes a Walk of Freedom that will be paid with the engraved bricks purchased through the fundraiser. To order your brick and be a part of this very special project, you can visit www.bricksrus.com, donor site /Haltom City, or stop by the rec center to fill out an order form. 4x8 bricks are $40, and 8x8 bricks are $100, and the deadline is March 1st. Haltom City calendars are now available at the City Hall, the Recreation Center, and the library. The registration is now open for co-ed youth soccer, and the registration deadline is February the 28th. The season will begin the week of March 11th. The cost for 4 and under and 6 under is $50. The cost for 8 and under and 10 and under is $80. They have a special, that best special discount is passed, but the coaches and referees are needed. Contact the rec center for more information. The Parks and Recreation Department has begun the process to build a new 10-year park and open space master plan with the help of MHS Planning, and are in need of input from all our residents. A brief survey is available online through the Parks and Rec Facebook page or city website, or you can fill out a hard copy at the rec center and library, and the deadline is tomorrow, February 12th. Online applications will now be accepted for the 2019 Fine Arts Student Scholarship. The scholarship is for Haltom City graduating seniors attending Haltom or Shannon High School, and more details are available on the city website. 3 winners will be awarded $750 toward their college, and the deadline is Friday, March 22nd, 2019. The Northeast Environmental Team, NEET, will be hosting a Save from a Rainy Day, a rain barrel workshop. The workshop will be held at Haltom City Public Library on Saturday, March the 23rd from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Excuse me, that's 11:30 a.m. The cost is $25, which covers the supplies for your new rain barrel, and online registration is available at www.tinyurl.com YBK4PDOW. Space is limited, so please register. You can save the date for the 10th annual Haltom City Car Fest, which will be on Saturday, April 6th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Haltom High School. And be sure to like the Car Fest Facebook page for the most updated information. With the public library, the teen programs, family movie nights, Super Science Saturdays, adult GED, ESL classes, and other library activities are all listed on the library's website for their dates and times. Some of these programs have changed, so please check the website. The 5th annual Night of Romance will be held on February 15th at the Haltom City Public Library, where you can enjoy snacks and beverages, a scavenger hunt, readings from works by the author, while mingling with local romance authors. They will also be selling and autographing their books, and don't forget to bring a camera for the photo booth. And that's our announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Next is a presentation by Anthony DeLeon with the Haltom High School DECA program, the Creative Technical Education Month.
Okay, this is a proclamation for the Distributive Education Club of America, Career Technical Education Month. Whereas the Distributive Education Clubs of America, DECA, is a nationwide organization that numbers over 3,500 high school chapters and 275 collegiate chapters, with 33 members in local chapter at Haltom High School. And whereas this group has existed at Haltom High School for nearly 50 years, benefiting not only the students but the local community, as well as their volunteer activities such as feeding families during Thanksgiving and hosting the Jingle Bell Fun Run that recently raised $1,000 to provide $100 for 10 individual families at Christmas. And whereas several former members of the Haltom High School DECA program have been successful in local businesses and have served on school boards, community organizations, and state and local politics. And whereas the local DECA group has been competing in the state competition and have established a recognizable reputation across the state, but have now set their goal to compete at the national level. And whereas this organization, under the leadership of DECA President, I'm going to mess this up, sorry, Eleazar De Leon, desires to recognize February as Career Technical Education Month to inform the community of the group's desire to promote positive learning structure and unleash the potential of Haltom High School students toward achieving their education and career goals. Therefore, I, David Averitt, Mayor of Haltom City, and on behalf of the City Council, the city staff, and the citizens, do hereby proclaim February as Career Technical Education Month in Haltom City, and urge all citizens to support the efforts of our local DECA High School chapter. Thank you so much. And Mr. De Leon, why don't you explain what DECA is so our citizens can understand why we have this proclamation?
DECA really focuses on business and all the aspects of business. It goes anywhere from fashion merchandising to entrepreneurship to marketing. It has really helped me grow as a person and as a leader. I've been able to impact not only my high school but now my community with the Jingle Bell Fun Run, and this is the first time that I think Haltom High School has seen anything like this. So I think it's really fun really exciting that DECA gets to be able to look back and say, now we have CTE month, which is also the big thing in BISD, helping all these students not only further their career path, but helping them grow as people too, because that's what it's done for me. Right now I'm a sophomore taking a junior class, entrepreneurship, helping me grow my experience in business, which is what I want to do when I grow up. So.
Moving right along to our consent agenda, which consists of items number 1 and 2. We're in line for motion if nobody has any questions regarding that. Dr. Trong.
Mayor, I want to make a move to approve item number 1, number 2. Number 1 one is minutes. Number two on the number O-2019-004.15.
Thank you, Dr. Strong. Councilmember Thompson.
That would be for a second, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion for approval in a second. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, if you would please signify your votes. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Now, agenda item number 3, which is ordinance number O-2019-003-01. Mr. Chapman. Welcome, sir. And if you would just, state your name for the record.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm Steve Chapman, Chairman of the Haltom City Charter Committee. And this is the second reading for the Haltom City Charter proposed charter amendments. We went through these amendments in great detail on the first reading. Our hope is that tonight that we can provide you with any clarification, answer any questions that you may have that may help you decide your votes as to these amendments. While I should be able to answer some of the questions that you'll have, some of the people that we have that are very important to me tonight is from the City Attorney's Office, Ms. Alicia Cray, who will probably answer the majority of the questions or clarifications that you have tonight. We also have HR Director Tony Beckett and Director of Finance Jennifer Fung here with respect to their particular articles that they're asking for changes on. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to council as far as going through this. We do have the information up where we can go through this if you want to look at the information, but I'll leave it up to council as to directing your questions and moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. So what is the pleasure of the council regarding this?
We can go article by article if that's something that's convenient to you, or we can jump however you want to go through the materials.
Is there a preference?
I think we should go through it.
Okay, so we'll just start at the beginning and we'll go through it.
First proposed change is in section 2.03, subsection 5, for the development of an ethics commission. Let me see if I can get our slides to work with us. That is on page 3 of your documents. Again, 2.03, subsection 5, the development of an ethics commission. This is also related to the changes in Article 10. I believe that's subsection 2. We'll go through that in just a moment, should you need some clarifiers on that.
Are there any questions on that? I don't see any.
Okay, hearing none, you might want to jump to Article 10 very quickly. If we could, we'll come back to that. But just to be clear, 10.02A in the ethics policy, both subsection A and B are related to this article on 2.03. So as we go through this, please understand that there's a connection between the formation of the ethics committee and the changes effective for 10.02A in ethics committee, ethics policy. So we'll come back, just to kind of give you a heads up there, we'll come up to 3.01, limitation of consecutive terms for the elected officials. And there's verbiage here from both the committee and from the city's attorney's office, asking for the change to terms specifically to the mayor's terms, and there's language around this that's related to the changes made by the attorney's office.
Any questions regarding that? Councilmember Rowe.
Yeah, and so just to understand that an individual can run for mayor and sit for 5 terms?
Correct.
And so why was the decision made to say, because right now an individual could be on the dais for 10 years, but they would have to do three terms as a council member and then hop over, or Yeah, which is 10. Why was the decision made to say that?
Go to 5.
For one seat to be on there for 10 years.
The general commentary around this particular section was related to mayoral experience from those members of the committee that had been in the seat before and had experienced some difficulty with basically having the mayor get to the point where, first of all, they're beginning to learn the job, to understand the job, and then to ultimately begin to create some influence, not only in our own city, but in our sister cities around us, and being able to serve enough term that they have influence not only on the job, but among other cities. So the determination of that was that it takes time for any mayor to get in a seat, understand what they have, get the expectations, kind of garner some confidence, and then to begin to create influence.
Now, why was that thought process put for the council seats? So if somebody wanted to run 5 consecutive times for a council seat?
There was some consideration on that, and there was actually a consideration to move that to a longer term, but as we get into the details, it began to appear very quickly that it created some legal issues around when we could hold elections, and ultimately the committee decided to back out of that. There was quite a bit of conversation on that, but ultimately, based on input from the city's attorney's office, it actually leaves us to our detriment as far as how often we can have the elections or when we could have the elections. So we changed some language. There would be some language changes required in the charter that would create some difficulty for us. So the committee's decision was to simply back out of.
So council members less disruptive or less influenced by state law and constitutional issues? Or
Ray, could you kind of speak to this again?
I guess, yeah, because I imagine there's some confusion why the mayor and not a council person.
Right, so there was a lot of discussion between extending the term limits from 2 years to 3 years, and once you go to a 3-year term limit, then you have some constitutional issues. With regards to only extending the mayor's number of terms to 5 and not council members, there's a lot of discussion of the mayor is not a voting member of this body, whereas council members are. So they wanted to leave council members at the current term, but allow, since the mayor doesn't have a vote, to extend his term out.
I'm just trying to, I guess, paint the picture of why the decisions were made, because I was able to attend some of the meetings, but not all of them, and so this just answers some questions that are out there. Thank you.
Mr. Groh, I attended all those meetings except for one, and I still have questions. So
that's a good thing. Always learning.
The edification.
Councilman Watkins, you had a question?
Excuse me, more of a statement than a question. I think you touched on it a little there. Having been married to a mayor and having several friends that have been mayors, I find that you have mayor's council, you've got this, that, and the other, that from a county and state perspective, I have found that our mayors do not reach the level of some sort of higher level up there. Mayor Hutchinson was a member of the thing that meets down there every other month. What is that?
Well, that's.
But that's a small thing. But what happens we're not having a voice in county and state things that we would have if we had a mayor that could be there long enough. And I don't know how they could subconsciously think that, but I just know that Mayor Trevino and some of the others that, who was the gentleman that was the mayor of Richland Hills for a while? They had 10-year limits, and he was right up to the last minute. The elderly, more elderly than me.
Yeah, Mayor Brown.
No, the guy was tall. Anyway, they had term in Richland Hills.
Oh.
Councilman Watkins, if I could kind of speak to that, I think that there is, age set aside, there's a level of maturity, if you will, for lack of a better term, that a mayor must have in running multiple terms to have that kind of influence. And I think that we have seen over the past where mayors in sister cities have had more influence, not only on their cities, but in the area, than ours, because of some of the limitations of the mayors.
With the exception of my wife, and she was involved in the chamber before, but with the exception of her, excuse me, over the years, our mayors haven't had any position to speak of on the at the chamber and at other things. And once again, it's got more to do with county and state than it does right here in Haltom City. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Please continue.
All right, moving on to section 3.02. Subsections 2, removal of 5, removal of 7 and 8, and changes to what is currently 6, 7, and 8, as well as the last paragraph of qualifications for city council.
I have a question. Can you give us some feedback as to why number 5 was removed? Just for the number 5 is not being arrears, qualifications for city council, not being arrears in the payment of any taxes or other liability due to the city, and that was apparently removed by the committee.
Yes, this has actually been held by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. Yes.
Ridiculous. Okay. It is, you know.
And again, I point to the fact that much of what's been presented to you in the way of changes comes from the city's attorney's office, and I want to clarify that one more time. There's a lot of cleanup that's been done here, at a great deal of work done by our city's attorney's office, and kudos again to Ms. Cray on just how much we've done. I understand it's voluminous. There's a lot of it, if you want to just state it that way. The need is clear for us to clean up the language in the charter. So that's why you're seeing a lot of this, and Alicia will have to speak to a lot of those points to clear them up. Councilman Groh.
Yes, I'm guessing that number 7, not have any financial interest, same Supreme Court decision?
The remainder of the changes are due to the election code provisions.
Okay.
The election code preempts what qualifications you can have to be on the ballot, and so the changes are to mirror the election code is what will be left mirrors the election code.
But there are provisions in the election code for home rule cities to make their own rules.
So the qualifications are preempted. So even though you're a home rule city, you have to follow the election code on those.
Okay.
And as a point of clarification as well, there's information in 10.02A that might help clarify some of that as well. Mr. Groh.
Oh. Councilman Weist.
This may be a question for, hang out. So since I know election codes, that's why we're changing this. So would that mean the 7 and 8 would need then to be maybe an ordinance? Then?
So you already have contractual relationship with the city that's already addressed in your Code of Ethics ordinance. We also included in 10.02, as Mr. Chapman was just alluding to, that the Code of Ethics does have to address contractual relationships with the city so that it can't be taken out later, but it'd be a charter requirement that be there. And then 8 is already, it's a kind of a duplicate of a constitutional provision. I believe I have notes elsewhere, but that is addressed in state law.
Again, pointing back primarily to our state and municipal code. Anything else on 3.02? All right. Skip a couple of pages, shall we? Let's go to 4.01. And I might as well just sit down. Ms. Gray.
Sure. This is just kind of to provide some clarification and just kind of clean up this section, really lay out what special elections can be called for.
Does anyone have any questions regarding that? Councilmember Nunn.
Okay, my understanding, and I received this from Mr. Olson, is that basically all of these sections, really the only ones that the legislature needs changing is section 4.01. I think there's 3 of them. And it's all in the election code, is that correct? I mean, it's
Right.
kind of mandated.
So it's section 3.02 that we just discussed, 4.03, which will then mirror section 3.02. And then there's the provision,
4.01, is that one?
nope, 4.01 is not required. It's 4.03.
Okay.
And then 6.01, I believe, was the other.
Okay. 6.0 what? Because I have down 2.
6.02. 02, sorry.
Okay, so those are the
Number cut
ones
off at the bottom.
that really needs to be changed throughout the whole thing. But if they weren't changed, if we didn't have these changes, the state would, I mean, we go to whatever, we just have to use whatever the state says, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Even though it's not in here, we just go with what the state says.
Right, so if you were to leave section 3.02 that we just discussed as is, and someone had arrears was in arrears of taxes to the city, and you tried to enforce that provision against them, the election code would preempt you, constitutional law would preempt and say you can't actually enforce that provision of your charter.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Wouldn't go too far.
I'm just.
I do think that the cleanups, if you will, that the city's attorney's office is presenting helps us to ensure that our charter, again, stands the rigors of change, that it keeps us within the state code, makes those changes where we don't have to keep coming back to the charter and back to the charter should the law change. It simply makes those points where it points to state law and keeps out all of the fray, if you will, in most of those cases, and basically keeps us clean moving forward. All right. No other questions on 4.01?
No, sir, I don't see any.
4.03.
As I just mentioned, 4.03 is taking out the language that we just discussed in 3.02 because one, it would be duplicative. Also, a lot of it can't be there. So it's just taking it out, cleaning it up. It's just changing it to filing with the secretary all required state applications. And then in changing in section B, the requisite number of signatures required by the election code. Right now, the charter requires 50, but this section of the election code is based on the number of voters you had in the prior election, so that could fluctuate and make your charter out of compliance with the election code. And then the final change to this section was asked by Mr. Camacho to add that one of the forms of identification be a photo ID.
Councilmember Nunn, did you have a question on this?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Are there any questions regarding this section? Seeing none, okay.
Move to 4.06.
Again, this section is now just laying out that state election, or your city elections are going to be covered by the election code. If there's a provision of the election code that's absent, the charter can take effect there. It's also providing you a savings clause that if one element were perhaps to be missed, if the election was conducted in substantial compliance with state law, it would not then invalidate your election.
Does anyone have any questions regarding that? 4.06. Seeing none, okay.
And 407, so we move to 408. And then down to 4.09. This is all new. Section 4.09 is completely new.
And this is just laying out the practice that your city already has, where a majority vote is required and then a runoff election in the case that you have multiple candidates for one office that do not receive a majority vote.
So this is the 50+1?
Yes.
Okay.
This is actually what we do today, correct?
Yep, this is already what you do, it's just laying it out in the charter for clarification.
Councilmember Nunn.
Okay, I know that's what we already do, but did y'all even look at plurality of votes? Because anytime there's three people that run for there's gonna be a runoff. I mean, I think it always has been. There might be an instance where there wasn't, but it calls for a runoff election anytime you have three or more people that are running in the same spot. Did y'all discuss I mean, obviously that goes into more costs, more time, later filling that position, you know, those kinds of things. I guess my question is, was it talked about plurality of votes?
I don't remember any conversation
I
around
don't believe so,
plurality.
because it was already done by majority vote. I just brought language that clarified the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nunn. Councilmember Watkins.
This is for Art. Excuse me. Approximately what does it cost to hold an election? It would just like a runoff election because it won't be held by the county or the state or anything. Just be us. What is the overall cost to have a special election?
Yeah,
like that?
we would still have to contract a runoff election, and you're looking at probably 17 to 20,000. On top of the preliminary 17 to 20,000, and if you're looking at charter amendment, you're going to look at another 10,000 added to that.
I think, kind of like Councilmember Nunn, we're always looking at ways to save nickels and dimes, and you start talking about $10,000 to $20,000 to settle a matter that should be settled at the. I think the plurality thing is the way to go. Personally, I think that's a complete waste of money. Never mind what it costs the candidate, that's their problem, but it costs the city a lot of money for us to have an additional election.
Again, Councilman Watkins, this is Haltom City's current process. We're not changing anything, we didn't add anything, we didn't take anything away. This is simply codifying it into our charter. This is your process today.
Art, I have a question. To the best of your knowledge, over the last 10 years, how many runoffs have we had?
I recall 4.
4 in the last 10 years? Okay.
In the last 4 years.
Yeah, 4 in the last 4 years, or 4 in the last probably 6 years.
Used to just not be dozens of people sign up for, like the Republicans getting on with the president.
I think if I remember correctly, doing the minutes on that, one of the statements was that with a voting percentage less than 10%, it seemed like you would have more of a caring to want to vote. It's not. It was someone expressed the attitude of like, well, only 8 to 9% of registered voters vote in Haltom City, so it doesn't affect them at all just to go ahead and keep things as they were. It was kind of an idea. It was showing that there's not that many people voting, so let's just go ahead and keep going. If it was really, I know you're very much aware of people wanting the plurality to save the money, but in essence, it was like, well, if there's only that many people coming out to vote, it doesn't seem like they're very much bothered with if we have a runoff or not. That was kind of an attitude that was expressed. So don't change if it ain't broke.
And just for a point of clarification, section 3.01 does already address that it requires a majority vote, but it didn't clarify that there's a runoff procedure and all of those, so that's why 4.09 was brought to clarify that. So if you do want to go to a plurality, you would have to strike that from section 3.01.
Well, excuse me, Ken. I want everybody to be aware of the fact that has nothing to do with this current situation. It would be for next year, right?
Right.
So I'm not looking at. I haven't got any ulterior motives. I'm just saying that we've done things that I'm willing to pay my 10 or 20 cents towards the 10 or 20,000. But this seems ridiculous to me. I mean, absolutely ridiculous that you've got 3 people or 4 people or whatever it is running, and because one person doesn't have 51%, I disagree with that completely.
To your point, Councilman, I think that is something that you will want to cover with the next charter review committee that comes forward.
I have a question. This may be for, or it is for our legal counsel. Based on your experiences with municipalities, how common is it to have the way that ours is set up as opposed to the plurality vote?
It's been our experience. Most cities prefer to have the majority vote requirement. The way plurality vote works, for anybody who doesn't understand it, if whoever gets the most votes wins the election. If you have 3 people running, or 4 people running, or 5 people running, none of them needs to have a majority vote in order to be elected. Of course, that's typically what's done with statewide races. We have runoffs when a majority vote is not obtained by somebody for that very reason. Mayor, we see typically home rule cities such as Haltom City. In their charter, they do require plurality votes because the election code leaves it up to cities to make that decision. And typically the larger cities have determined that it's in the best interest of the citizens to require a majority vote, but that's typical. This council has the legal authority to amend to send to the voters a proposition to amend the charter to only require a plurality vote if you want to do that. So that's certainly something that could be done, but it's a bit unusual.
Yeah. I know when I ran in 2010, it was a 3-way, 3 people involved against an incumbent, but we didn't have a recall, runoff then. Yeah, so we were able to. But I understand we've had 4 in the last 6 years, but
There was, again, there was no discussion among the committee on anything regarding plurality.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this 4.09? Ms. Nunn.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. So, Mr. Olson, you said that the larger cities tend to do the majority and the smaller cities the plurality. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, because I heard it like 2 different times back and forth, and
Yeah,
okay.
Typically cities with a population of a few hundred people or a few thousand people have a plurality vote because they don't go to the trouble of changing the election code requirement. The requirement in the election code is you have to have at least a plurality vote for an election, but the election code specifically provides for cities to adopt a majority vote if they want to. Again, most cities that have 5,000 or more in population opt to go to a home rule charter form of government, which Haltom City has done, and in that charter, typically, there's a majority vote requirement.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions regarding this? Okay, please continue.
All right, we move to section 5.06 for the independent audit, and this is the recommendation from Director of Finance Jennifer Fung. Any concerns about this?
Any questions regarding this 5.06? Okay, I don't see any.
Thank you, sir. On 6.01, this is a fairly simple change. Hopefully it's fairly simple to understand. Changing 6.01, the start from any council member to the mayor and council members shall be subject to.
Any question regarding that? Okay, perfect.
Okay. And in 6.02, again, this is language petition of recall, and this is language from the attorney's office, cleaning up the information in this particular provision. Is there any clarification needed on this one?
I don't see any.
All right. 6.07, again, changing from in not less than 45 days from the date such petition was certified to the city council to allow sufficient time to meet the requirements of this charter and state law. So it's just a cleanup of the language once again.
Any questions on that? None? Okay.
Moving to 6.08, this one is, I think it's pretty simple, straightforward, and in our best interest, again, changing the terms yes and no in subsection A2 to the terms for the recall of and naming that person, or for against the recall of and naming that person, rather than a simple yes/no vote. This gives much more clarification to our voters out there as to exactly what they're voting on.
No questions.
Okay. Let's move to 7.02. And this one might be something that, again, Alicia, that you might want to step in on.
So, in your charter, you're allowed to create initiative and referendum processes, which is allowing your citizens to bring forth legislation or remove from something that you have passed and remove it. So what this section has done is removed from the field some items that the citizens could bring forth either through initiative or referendum. So items such as issuing of bonds and creating your rates for services, your budget, kind of those big items that you're going to spend a lot of time discussing and making sure. So it's just removing from the field the items that can be brought forward through initiative or referendum by the citizens.
Councilmember Grow.
Is there anything in state law that prohibits these things, or is it just that they are so big that you think that they shouldn't be?
These have been allowed by state law, like through court rulings have allowed these items to be removed from the field.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding this? Okay.
Alicia's getting quite a workout here from sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up. We begin the next paragraph on 7.02. Again, cleaning up the language from to be held at the next state uniform election date to as soon as possible, subject to the Texas election code.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
All right, 7.03 for referendum. Again, takes out the term immediately and restates it to within 10 days.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. And now, section 8.01.
So the majority of section 8.01 is just cleaning the language and kind of making it more accessible. It also is adding subsection B, which allows the city to sell utility services outside of city limits.
Any questions on that? Seeing none. Oh, we're good.
Okay, and then moving to 8.02, again, this is kind of cleaning up, making it more accessible and to understand. What has been added to this is limiting the franchise agreements to 20 years is new, that the franchises not be exclusive. And let's see, the rest is just clarifying and cleaning the language, but those are the two big additions to that section.
Does anybody have any questions regarding this? We're on 8.02. Okay, don't see any.
We move on to Article 9, Section 9.01, subsection B and C. And these are clarifiers as to the functions of the city manager. And again, Alicia will get back over to you here. There you go.
And this is just adding language that requires the city or allows the city manager to appoint that the council can appoint someone to fill his position in the case of an absence, and that the council will fix his compensation. Additionally, we added some language to subsection C to indicate that the listed powers and duties of the city manager are not limited to those listed, but they include, and then adding 7, 8, and 9 that he's see that all state laws and ordinances are enforced, attends all council meetings, and directs and supervises the administration of all departments.
Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Okay, I do not see any.
We move to section 9.06, subsection F. Very clean, just to add the words as amended.
Okay, I don't see any questions or comments on that.
All right, moving to section 10.02 A and B. And again, these tie back to the Ethics Committee information that we talked about. This is the committee's recommendations along with the Attorney's Office recommendations on how to clean this up in allowing this council body to establish an Ethics Commission, and indeed to make sure that we enforce this from the Municipal Code of Ethics. It does not set forth anything in the way of a directive for you as far as the establishment of what that Ethics Commission may function like, look like, act like, smell like. Those are all functions of the City Council to establish that, but these tie directly into 10.02 A and B.
Does anybody have any questions regarding this? Councilmember Nunn.
Thank you. Regarding the Ethics Commission, I sat in on the Charter Review Committee when this was discussed, and I have several questions and concerns about it. I didn't bring it up before, but I knew we'd be coming to it again. I remember there were 3 members in that committee, 3 long-term, 2 mayors, and 1 member that had been here for many, many years serving on boards. They all 3 felt that this Ethics Commission idea would be catastrophic to the city. And all 3 of those people, I look up to them a lot as great leaders of the community in the past, and they still continue to be members of the community and outstanding citizens. We already have things in place now regarding the ethics, and since I've been here just the last year, really, have I seen any kind of ethics really come up? I felt we've done a good job in council addressing that, and I don't really understand why we have to have an ethics commission. I understand that the council will decide how, who, what, when, how, and all that kind of stuff, but we've gone many, many years without having an ethics commission, and it just seems like a little bit too much Big Brother to me. So that's my opinion on that. Thank you.
Was there a question or just a statement?
It's a statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nunn. Are there any questions or comments from the council regarding this? Again, we're on 10.02. Councilmember Watkins.
I guess this is a question for our city attorney. A number of years back, 2001 or 2, we had an ethics complaint filed against the council. I thought it was flaky, but the reasoning behind it. But how was that generated? There must be something in place because 7 council members, everybody but the mayor, had ethics filed against them for what I considered a ridiculous reason, but anyway, it was done. Under what authority was that held?
That was brought under state law. That was a circumstance involving a bond election where the city council engaged a firm to put together materials for the bond election. And it was actually made clear in the contract with that company that there's an election code provision that any materials cannot advocate the passage or defeat of a measure for a bond. It has to just be neutral information to inform the citizens what the bond election is about. But there was a complaint brought that the materials created by this company were favorable to the bond election rather than being neutral, and a complaint was filed against most of the council members, if not all of them, on account of having approved the materials that were brought back to them. So that was filed with the Texas Ethics Commission under a state law that provides that elected officials are subject to ethics rules, and we had a proceeding before the Ethics Commission, and it was resolved. It was settled with the Ethics Commission. But that is a different matter than your ethics code that you've adopted in Haltom City that applies to elected officials and appointed officials here, that the city council has control over the elected officials, and the city manager has control over the appointed officials if they violate your city ethics code. But elected officials are always going to be subject to the state ethics provisions, and complaints can be filed with the Texas Ethics Commission, and that's what happened back there.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding that, Councilman Walker?
Can you say that in English? That was real drawn out.
Ask it again, and I'll give you a very
you sound like an attorney.
Imagine that.
So, let's say, for instance, X amount of people decide they want to file an ethics charge on the council. I have a tendency to believe that citizens ought to be able to do something to you if they want to, but other than recalls. But and that's fine too, I guess. But what I'm trying to find out, I think, is what Councilmember Nunn's kind of asking is there some sort of avenue towards having ethics complaint filed against city and council members, even if it's not, doesn't have to do with the bond issue. I understood the bond issue. Didn't that get looked at? I think Councilmember Dale Clark went down to Austin and looked at that particular item. But anyway, that's past history. What I'm trying to find out is if it's narrowed down to just if there's an election, if there's a bond issue. If it's not a bond issue, is there a path towards something that they can do outside of recall?
Yes, there's two paths. They can file a complaint with the city council under your city ethics code, or they can file a complaint with the Texas Ethics Commission under state law. Citizens have either option.
Perhaps if I could add a little commentary, a little bit more information. I'll try to be brief. And to Councilman Nunn's comments, there was information that led some of those committee members to believe that, based on the contentious nature of politics as a whole, that a quote-unquote ethics commission could create more problems than it fixes. But the imaginings of the committee itself was to allow this council body to establish a process whereby any citizen could file an ethics complaint against any sitting council member, and that complaint would then follow a process flow, if you will, that ultimately would have to stand some test of whether or not that ethics filing had validity, and then pass to the attorney's office for clarification, and then back to the council body ultimately for the final vote as to action on that ethics committee filing. So we did present some materials to you at the first reading. We have more materials for you should you decide this is something that you would like to have considered in the charter that I think would help clarify how that committee or commission might actually work. But I do think that there's a whole lot of detail there. There's a whole lot of detail that has to be filled in. It's a very wide path, if you will. It's a very broad statement to bring in an ethics commission, and that would be something that this council body would have to discuss and bring forward with all of the requirements, all of the standards that you would want, how you would want that complaint to go from hand to hand and come back to council to ultimately be voted on.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chapman, thank you. I know you've been told thank you for your time spent on this. You've said something, your statement, maybe 2-3 different times. Ethics complaints filed by citizens. I like that. Is there somewhere that we can put in here that ethics complaints can only be filed by citizens, or am I overlooking something?
I think that's part of the, I hate to call it beauty, but it's really the rendition that you decide that you move forward with forming an ethics commission is really up to you. And how that would work and what it says, who can file, when they can file, what the response is from the city, and each step along the way would need to be determined by this council body. This simply allows you the opportunity to form such an ethics commission, and then it would be up to this group of people to determine, again, the step-by-step process, who files the complaint, and ultimately from when it gets entered, intake, and then final decision.
So maybe, council, do we need wording in there that an ethics complaint can only be filed by a citizen?
Councilmember Brown, you do not. You can require that in your ethics code. Your municipal code of ethics is what it would be called. But if that's an issue that the council wants to address, then we can bring that to you at any time in the form of an amendment to your municipal code of ethics.
Yeah, that's, Councilman Brown, I think that's where you would want to place all of these requirements. It's not in the charter. I don't think you would want to outline the step-by-step processes. You want that in the municipal code of ethics. That's where you would house all the information and outline all the materials as to how that would work.
So when we get more detailed into if this all passes into the ethics commission is when we will put the wording in there for complaints filed by citizens only.
And even if this doesn't pass, you can do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can amend the municipal code of ethics outside of the charter revisions.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Chapman.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you. I think, first of all, you don't want to limit it just to the citizens because you have contractors, you have other entities that affect our city, affect our council. So I think you want to leave it, because there could be violations from people that we would have no idea. So I think if you limit it to just only citizens, then you're leaving out particularly the contractors that do work for our city. So, but what I wanted to say was, you should be thinking of this ethics commission as a way to protect the council. I think it's all about transparency, that they have no idea, the citizens do not know when a complaint has been filed and we go into executive session. They have no idea what's going on. And I think by doing this commission and bringing this forth, it is a way of protecting our council, that they can see that the decisions based on the investigation that has gone on through that particular commission and through the attorney's office, then it would once be presented to the council and be a way of protecting the council so that people can see that you're making a decision based on the law and what at that point would be an ethics violation. So I just wanted to clarify that as a tool of protection for us sitting on council, and to also qualify that with our citizens so that they see that it's not just being pushed back and we're not patting each other on the back in the executive council meetings.
So one of the recommendations that was brought forth by this committee was the potential of having the municipal code of ethics basically printed out and available to the public in a public place in a foyer somewhere out here. I think that all of us can realize that no matter how many times we publish information, whether we put it out on social media, whether we put it in our newsletter, whether we put it on the newspapers, oftentimes the only time that a citizen or someone else has any understanding of how the government works, in particular with cities, is when they have a complaint. And so how do they know what they should be doing? How do they understand? How do they bring some type of complaint forward? And then they've got to begin to turn the wheels of understanding of how do I go about this? So by having that municipal code of ethics available to anyone in the public out here and available, then they could at least have an understanding of where do you start? This is a starting point. So I think it would be beneficial. But again, there's just a lot of getting into the weeds here with how that commission would work.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Okay.
All right. At this point, Ms. Beckett, the rest of this night is yours.
Okay. Good evening. Okay, so, Article 11, we've made a number of changes to that, and we met with both of the chiefs and then a representative from the Fire Association and the Police Association. I don't want to be here all night, I'm sorry. To get the changes that we're proposing for y'all tonight. In section 11.03, we're proposing to change it from 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners with 2 additional alternates. We're also putting term limits in for the commissioners and limiting to 2 terms with a maximum of 2 two-year terms. Are there any questions on that section?
Seeing none. Oh, Ms. Nunn, you have one? Oh.
Okay, just clarification.
Okay.
If you have you need to have three members, right, to be able to perform the commission duties? And then you have your 2 additional,
Yes.
but they would need to be the same 3 for a 2 or 3 or 4 day.
Yes, they would.
Investigation. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? None? Okay.
On section 11.05, this, we're changing it from 2 members constituting a quorum to 60%, so that regardless of how many members are there, you can tell whether you have a quorum or not. There's also an additional section in here that says that a commissioner would have to recuse themselves if they have more than acquaintance with either the appealing party or the department head. And that would cause a reasonable person to doubt the commissioner's ability to remain impartial.
Councilmember Grow.
Have we defined what more than an acquaintance is?
Alicia.
So the language of a reasonable person is belief that they cannot remain impartial was our best effort to define more than acquaintance, because it's not based on a familial relationship.
Yeah, it's how you know him.
Right, human resources.
You go play softball with him or.
Right, so that they wanted it to be broader than that, but saying hi at a grocery store doesn't really fit into being able to start our language. So the reasonable person language was the best attempt at finding that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding that? Okay, seeing none, okay.
Okay, in section 11.13, we've broken out the length of the probationary period for employees, and if an employee is certified, meaning that they already have the certifications and they wouldn't have to go to an academy, their probationary period would remain 1 year. But if we hire someone, say in the police department, that has to be sent to the academy, they would serve an 18-month probationary period.
Anything on that one? Okay, don't see any.
In section 11.17C,
This change has to do with us being able to give multiple tests over a 21-day period. In North Texas, we're in a very competitive market for police officers and for firefighters. So we'd like to have the ability to travel all over the state of Texas within a 21-day period and create one eligibility list. This also provides the opportunity to test electronically if that technology exists in the future.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
That's section C. And then section F is, this is again talking about entry-level examinations, and this provides an opportunity for candidates to get up to an additional 15 points. Currently, the charter says that if you are an honorably discharged veteran and you present evidence of that at the test, you get 5 points. We're adding another section that says that if you are already certified, you'd get an additional 5 points. And then if you have served for 36 months as a paid peace officer without more than a 90-day break in service, you'd get an additional 5 points. And the purpose of this is to put them a little bit higher on the list, because those people cost the city less money because we don't have to send them to an academy. And also it speeds up our process as well.
Okay, I don't see any questions or comments on that.
In section 11.19A, we're just changing the terminology for the titles. When this charter was passed, it was we had fire captains, and now we have battalion chiefs. And in section B, we had police lieutenants, and now we have police captains. And then in section D, we are taking out the section that says that there must be 3 potential candidates for each current vacancy.
I don't see any questions.
Okay. In section 11.21, we're adding a section that just says that unless technology exists that provides an identical test and testing period to be utilized for promotional exams in section A. And then in section C, we're switching around the verbiage so that the test is based on the source material referenced in the examination notice and the duties for which the position is that's being tested.
Everybody seems to be good with that one.
In section 11.22, currently, the minimum cutoff for a passing test for a promotional exam is 70. There may be an occasion where we have a test that's extremely hard and nobody passes the test. So rather than completely discard that exam, we'd like to lower the test. If nobody passes, lower the passing score to 60 so that we can create an eligibility list. If nobody passes with a 60, then we would have to completely start over the process with a additional test.
Is there anything on that one? Anybody has Councilmember Nunn?
Thank you. Who develops the tests? Is that state?
No, we have a consultant. We use one of several testing companies, just depending upon the position in the department.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none.
In section 11.24, section C, this charter that we're acting under now, when it was approved, the fire department was working 24-hour shifts. So 3 consecutive days would cover all 3 of the shifts if they wanted to have an election for an alternate promotional system. Well, they've gone to working 48 hours and then being off for 96 hours. So in order to capture everybody, you would have to be 6 consecutive days. So we just want to narrow it down to 1 24-hour period during each shift. And also allow for electronic elections if technology exists.
Is everybody okay with that one? Okay, looks good.
In section 11.25B, we're extending the length of time to create a new eligibility list from 90 days to 100 days.
Okay, looks good.
In section 11.26, we're just removing the words, "the commission by delivery to." So the department head will be required to submit the discipline to the Director of Civil Service within 10 days. Or within 5 days, I believe it's 5 days for them to submit it. And if they don't submit it, the discipline is null and void.
Are there any questions regarding that? Okay, don't see any, okay.
In section 11.27, the change is identical to 11.26, and it's also the same change in 11.28.
Okay.
In section 11.29, this puts some meat in the length of time for an appeal hearing for an employee. It extends the time from 30 days to 60 days. It spells out that the period may be extended by written request of the city or the employee for an additional 90 business days, subject to the approval of the Civil Service Commission chairperson. It provides an opportunity for an additional extension with the approval of the department head and the appealing employee, pending approval of the Civil Service Commission chairperson. This section was added in case something happens, that either the appealing employee got seriously ill and was hospitalized and couldn't come for some reason, or the same thing for the department. And there's a section added that says if the initial request for an extension is not approved and dated by the chairperson within the initial 60 business days, the maximum extension is 30 business days. Section B says that if the appeal is not heard within the prescribed deadlines due to the appealing employee, the department head's decision stands, and if it's not heard because of the department head, then it's overturned if the city delays it.
Any questions regarding this one? 11.29.
I have just a little bit more in that section. It's a rather long one. And then under 11.29C, that says that the commissioners will render a written decision within 15 business days after the hearing. It currently says 45 days. In section D, it allows the department head to include performance issues occurring within the last 5 years of the incident that is being appealed when they go to the appeal hearing. Currently, the department head is limited to the charging document that is given to the employee. And then section E is added, and that gives the opportunity for the appealing employee or the city to request recusal of one of the commissioners.
Any questions on that? I don't see any.
Thank you, Ms. Beckett. I'll take another opportunity, as we stipulated to at the first reading, that there were a lot of people involved with the recommended charter amendments that we are presenting to you. Not to get into all the details, but I want to thank the committee members, certainly the city's attorney's office, Ms. Beckett, Ms. Fung, Art Camacho, our city secretary, and many of the sitting council for your input, along with the chiefs of police, chiefs of fire, and representatives of those departments. There was a lot of information to cover, and I think we've done it in an expeditious manner. Again, a large majority of this being presented by the city's attorney's office to allow us to keep this charter clean moving forward, and hopefully not have to come back to the table in the coming years to add more in cleaning up language from the charter. There's a lot to it. I understand that, but I believe that the recommendations that we've made are reasonable and should be certainly taken under consideration. Are there any other questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Are there any questions for Mr. Chapman from the council? Seeing none, excellent presentation. Thank you, sir. And Ms. Cray, thank you as well. And Ms. Beckett, thank you for your information. So this is an action item, and we're in line for a motion. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that we accept ordinance number 02019-003-01 for a special election for the purpose of submitting the charter amendments to the voters.
Second reading.
Second reading.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Weist.
It's for a second.
Thank you, sir. Motion for approval in a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Dr. Trung.
Before we make a vote, I would like to say thanks to Ms. G. Chapman and all the community member and all the people involved in this. Look at this charter. That's the first time I have ever read the whole thing. That's a lot of work. And one more time, I appreciate that. Everyone involved in this one. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Okay, if you would please signify your votes. Bob? Motion passes with one abstention. Okay. Moving right along to agenda item number 4, resolution number R-2019-004-01. Consideration and/or action regarding amending resolution number R-2019-004-01, calling a general and special election for the vacancy in Council Place 5 and their charter amendments to be held on May 4, 2009. Mr. Camacho.
Yes, Mayor, this resolution amending, it was contingent upon the whether or not the council would pass this charter amendment election. So if you just look at the resolution, I just added 2 paragraphs. One is the third whereas, seeing that they have approved the ordinance tonight for the purpose of submitting charter amendments to the voters in a special election to be held in conjunction with the general election on May 4th, and then in conjunction with the general election of the 4th day of May 2019 between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. This will be included on a ballot in regard also to the general election for places, the mayor, 1, 2, and 7, the special election for place 5, and now we have a charter amendment. So we actually will have 2 special election items along with the general election.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions or comments from the council regarding that? Seeing none, if you would please signify with your votes.
Who made the motion?
Oh, Dr. Trung?
I'm sorry, Dr. Trung was on.
Yeah, Dr. Trung?
You like the motion to approve the resolution?
Mayor and Council, I would like to make a move to approve resolution number R-2019-004-01 for general and special election on Council Plate number 5. Yeah, on the charter member amendments.
That was my mistake. I apologize, council. We have a motion for approval. Councilmember Thompson.
That would be for a second.
Okay. Motion for approval in a second. Now, if you would please signify with your votes. Motion passes unanimous. All righty. Moving on to agenda item number 5, which is ordinance number O-2019-005-03. Consideration and/or action to authorize the issuance of City of Haltom City, Texas General Obligation Bonds, Series 2019, levying a continuing direct annual ad valorem tax within the limitations prescribed by law for the payment of the bonds, prescribing the form, terms, conditions, and resolving other matters incident and related to the issuance, sale, and delivery of these bonds, including the approval and distribution of an official statement pertaining thereto, authorizing the execution of a paying agent registrar agreement and an official bid form, complying with the provisions of the Depository Trust Company's letter of representation, authorizing the execution of any necessary engagement agreements with the city's financial advisors and/or bond counsel, and providing an effective date. First reading. Ms. Fung.
Mayor and the City Council, we are in the process of issuing $7.82 million of general obligation bonds, and the bonds are approved, the issuance is approved by the voters from the November 2010 and May 2018 bond elections. And the process is for building, construction of fire station, streets and sidewalks improvement, park improvement, and also costs related to the issuance of the bonds. And this morning, we received competitive bids from financial institutions. We have 13 bids that we received, and the result is very favorable. The interest rate that we receive is from 2.56812% to 2.78538.4%. And we are going to retire the bond within 15 years. And I have Mr. Andrew Fitman with Samco's Capital Markets here, and he can give you more detail of the bond results.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'll try to keep this brief, but Ms. Fung handed out to you before the meeting began the bid results. Right off the top, aside from this being a very good rate, this is the most bids I've ever seen any municipality that we work with, and the hundreds of bond sales that I've worked on. It's a testament, one, to I think the appetite of investors generally for municipal bonds, but it's a true testament to the name that you all have, the AA- credit rating that you would attract so many different interested parties. Gives you a very clear indication that you're doing a lot of things right, and it gives you a very clear indication that there's a strong appetite for people that want to invest in Haltom City. Raymond James, who I believe has bought our bonds before, was the winning bidder at that 2.56%. Did much better than we were conservatively estimating we would as we were going through the planning process. We kind of ran our numbers at 3.25%, so we've done much better. We're saving interest that we weren't necessarily anticipating. Again, amortizing over 15 years. This is a fixed rate bond, be callable in 10 years, just as almost all of our other debts are. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you all may have. I apologize I don't have a more formal presentation for you. I've been all over the state today and hopped off an airplane and came here as quick as I could. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have. If you approve this tonight, the funds will be in your bank on March 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Councilmember Trong, you have a question?
March 7th. March 7th. My apologies.
Yeah. You know, when I look at this list, and I already picked the least district rate, you know, and I don't see why we have to go to second, say almost $10,000. I think the best one is Raymond James, like you said, you know, and that's in my mind. I'm looking for the lowest one number.
Absolutely.
You
That's
are
what
right
the bid is
about that.
based upon. Yes, sir.
Thank you, because even the bottom guy, the $2.7 million, they still give us the same money, right?
That's the TIC. I apologize. The TIC is the true interest cost, and so that's the average interest rate. So it's 2.56% is the winning bid. The lowest bid, or the highest interest rate bid we received was 2.78%.
Yeah, you know, and they still, I mean, even the highest or lowest, we still have $7.8 million, right?
Absolutely. We will receive at closing $7,823,000 in your bank for these projects, which is the full authorization that was left outstanding from both of our bond elections.
Well, thank you. I should see why you don't have to give me a bunch of people here and, you know, give me the lowest one I like.
I understand. I wanted to show you how much interest there was for your bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trong. Councilmember Breaux.
When would be the first payment on this?
We're going to make our first payment February 1st of next year.
Okay, so we immediately start paying on them.
Yeah, we set it up such that Because these are paid for from our ad valorem taxes, we want to be able to set our budget and our tax rate for the upcoming year, collect those taxes before we then make our first interest payment, so we're not having to come out of our reserves.
And then after, let's say, we have a windfall of something, we can retire this after 10 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Breaux. Are there any other questions or comments from the council? Okay. Thank you, sir. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Welcome.
We are in line for a motion. Councilmember Breaux.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we approve ordinance O-2019-005-03, issuance of general obligation bonds, series 2019. First reading.
First and only reading.
First and only reading.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Nunn.
Thank you, Mayor. That's for a second.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion for approval and a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if you would please register your votes. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you, council.
If I could get you to sign both of these real quickly.
Okay.
So I can let the purchase here.
Go ahead and sign these. Is that okay? Okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah, just in case. Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 6, Facilities Amendment Agreement, consideration and/or action to approve amendment number 1 to the Facilities Agreements for the Idea Public Schools Edition, lots 1 of Block A. Mr. Van Nieuwenhuis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Being that it's late, I'll try to be brief. The Public Works Department does have this item and the next 3 items on your agenda. But the current item on your agenda is to consider the amendment to the facilities agreement with Idea Public Schools. The final plat for Idea Public Schools was approved by City Council back in September of 2018. Along with this final plat, there was a facilities agreement, which is a developer's agreement. We just call it a facilities agreement in Haltom City. This facilities agreement identified exactly what public infrastructure was required of the developer, any participation on the city's behalf, and things of that nature. So the big thing, besides the school putting a looped water main around their school, was Thomas Road through here is in pretty poor shape. Our thoroughfare plan identifies that road to be a collector street, which is 3 lanes. The amount of traffic that the school will be generating has warranted that this be upsized almost to its full capacity. And what ended up happening was the city will end up paying around $60,000 for 330 lane feet. The balance of it, which is 2,370 lane feet, is being paid by the developer. Additionally, the city has a rather large water main. It's plastic, PVC, north of Baker's Lane, but it is asbestos pipe south of Baker's Lane. We are in the process of relocating that main. Will probably be connected into the existing system within a matter of a week and a half. The last city utility is our sanitary sewer main. It is an 18-inch clay main. It needs to be upsized to a 21-inch main. Due to the time constraints, I met with the city attorney to see if there was any way we could perhaps amend the facilities agreement, which is what I'm bringing before you, and see if there's a way that we could put that cost onto that construction and engineering onto the developer. Under state law, we can't enter into an agreement with the developer The maximum that we can get into is 30% of the overall infrastructure cost. I'm not sure why that is. Perhaps Wayne can enlighten us on what the state legislatures do. Perhaps not. In any event, what that equates to for this project is $122,500. And so what I'm asking is that we enter into an amendment to construct, it looks like we'll be able to construct the new main from here to somewhere in here, and we'll leave it in such a shape that in a future phase, when this sanitary sewer main gets reconstructed north up through Thomas, that we won't be ripping up brand new pavement. So it's a long story to say that staff recommends that we enter into an amendment to the existing facilities agreement so that we can construct or replace some of the Thomas Road sanitary sewer main.
Thank you, Mr. Van Nieuwenhuis. Are there any questions for Greg? Again, this is agenda item number 6. Okay, seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Grow.
So I guess there's gonna be 120,000 that the city's gonna have to pay?
Correct, and we have that money in the fund balance for our CIP fund.
Okay.
And we're estimating that that's gonna be right around 600 foot, so it should put us somewhere right in there.
And what is the developer, what does Idea School pay so far? Or?
I think their amount was somewhere over 600,000.
600, okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Grove. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we are in line for a motion. Dr. Trone.
Mayor and Council, I would like to make a move to approve amendments number 1 to the facilities agreement for the Idea Public School addition lot number 1 of Block A.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion for approval. Is there a second? Councilmember Weist.
For a second.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion for approval in a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if you would please register your votes. Motion passed unanimous, so thank you. Moving right along to agenda item number 7, construction manager at risk, consideration and or action to approve the construction manager at risk project delivery method for the construction of fire station number 3.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Keith Fisher. I'm your somewhat new city engineer. This, like you said, this agenda item is for approval of the project delivery method for the fire station. City staff met with you on December 10th. We discussed several delivery methods, an executive session, and as per state law, this item is to formally adopt the construction manager at risk project delivery method for the fire station number 3. And to step back in time a little bit, I'm going to give the citizens and also the council just some background of where we were at the beginning and where we are now. Staff sent out RFQs, which are requests for qualifications for architects, on September of 2018, and the due date was Wednesday, October 17th of 2018. We had a really, really good response from this project. We had 15 architectural firms from Dallas and Fort Worth that submitted 30-page proposals, and all 15 were very, very good qualified architects. We had a selection committee, we'll get to it in just a second. We picked 4 firms for the interview process. Those were Hewitt Zollers Advanced Design, Komatsu Architects, BWR Architects, and RPGA Design Group. And as I said before, the selection committee, there was a 7-member committee. 4 representatives from the fire station, retired chief Chief Bynum, Brian Jacobs, Charles Knapp, and David Chilcutt represented the fire station. Rex Phelps represented the city manager's office. I represented Public Works, and I'll be the project manager on this project, and Janet Carver with finance.
Okay.
And after interviewing of the architects, we unanimously chose. Make sure I get them right. RPGA Design Group of Fort Worth, and our next step after that was to determine the project delivery method. And those project delivery methods were design, bid, build, construction manager at risk, and the CMR, and also the design bid project. And we chose the CMR project because that's the best way, based on our tight budget. And I'll go into the how the CMR project works real briefly. Basically, what it'll be, we'll have the contractor. He'll have a contract with the city, and the architect will have a contract with the city, and both will work directly for the city. The city will hire the architect first. And you'll be seeing that contract hopefully within the next 30 days. I've received final review comments from the architect based on our city attorney's comments. I received those today, and so we're going to work through those and hopefully have the AIA contract within the next 30 days. Once that is approved, they'll begin the design work. And when we get to about the 30% design stage, and that's the design development, that's where all the elements are in place, which is the floor plan, which has basically been approved, and the exterior and that sort of thing. That's when the construction manager will be hired at the 30% process. And how we'll do that will be through the RFQ process. We'll send out RFQs, and the city, along with the architects' input, interview several construction managers. At that point in time, we'll come up to an agreement on one, and we'll bring that to council for approval. And after that, the contractor, the construction manager, he'll work with the architect and the city on the constructability of design and also cost estimates. The architect will also have an estimator on his staff as a secondary review check. And what they'll do is they'll sit in all the design development meetings with the fire department staff. We'll also have David Cummings he's the head of our maintenance. He's going to be sitting in all those meetings because we want to have a building that, one, it's very functional, but two, when we have to replace a light bulb or whatever, if the air conditioner goes bad, that we know we have the right products in there, and it doesn't cost the city a lot of money to maintain it. That's very important on the longevity of the fire station. And we'll go through that process, and he'll cost out everything, through the construction plans. When we get about the 90% stage, that's when the construction manager will give the city a guaranteed maximum price, and that's his budget, that's his number. By contract, he has to stick with that number. If the number's over our budget, which we know it's $5.5 million project less the architectural fees. If he's over our construction budget, then we'll tone the project back a little bit. If he's way under budget, then we'll maybe add some things to the project. That depends on his price. But unless there's a change in scope, he is, by contract, that's his number. If there's anything that happens during construction, that's his problem, not the city. So we're guaranteed to get the building for that number. And that's a very safe method to use on that process. And just one other thing, the advantages of this process, it speeds the project up. It strengthens coordination between the architect and the city and the construction manager. Transparency is also enhanced. We're going to see what his overhead is, what his profit is. We'll see all the bids in the project. We'll see everything. And on some of the other project delivery methods, you see none of that. You get a number, and that's it. And so we'll have there'll be some contingency built into the contract that hadn't been decided yet. That's in case there's some things that we need to tweak during the construction. But those are the big advantages of this method. And where we are today, like I said earlier, we're working with the architect to finalize his portion of the contract, and you'll have that in hopefully the next 30 days. Then he'll start the process. Hopefully 7 to 8 month design process, and then probably about a 10-month construction process. So we're looking at maybe the fall, breaking ground, and then 10 months later we'll have the building up and running. And we're very excited about it, and I'm sure we'll be giving you all updates as we get through the process as far as how things are going and that sort of thing. When we get the final rendering of the building and all that, you'll definitely be seeing that for your approval. I know there's a rendering out front there. It may be tweaked just a little bit depending on, however the architect looks at the exterior. But that's pretty much it for my portion of the presentation. Like I said, the next time you'll see me is when the architect's contract comes aboard. And he'll be here, and I'll introduce you to him also. So you guys have any questions?
Thank you, sir. So are there any questions for Mr. Fisher? I don't see any. That was a good presentation. Thank you, sir. We are in line for a motion. Councilman Wiest.
Make a motion to approve the construction manager at risk project delivery method for the construction of fire station number 3.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Thompson?
That would be for a second.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion for approval and a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if you would please register your votes. Well, the motion did pass unanimous. There it is. Motion passed unanimous. Thank you, council. And thank you, Mr. Fisher. Moving right along to agenda item number 8, award the engineering agreements. Award of RFQ number 2018-312-002, consideration and/or action to award an engineering agreement for the Meacham Boulevard reconstruction project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back here again. Keith gets the good projects. I get the water, sewer, and street projects. Doesn't seem right. In any event, the Meacham Boulevard reconstruction project is identified in our current CIP budget for fiscal year 2019. The project is approximately 2,400 feet in length, and it goes from Beach Street to Old Denton Road. In August of 2018, staff put out a request for qualifications. 4 firms responded on September 12th, 2018. Those 4 firms were James Diott Engineering, J. Volk Consulting, Graham Associates, and Dan Baum Engineering Company. Again, a staff selection committee that was comprised of various city employees. I wanted to point out that we did put a Parks Department employee on this committee in case there were some landscaping enhancements we could do to this area that we wanted the Parks Department to be involved. Because right now, as you're aware, it's just a wide, somewhat flat street in an industrial area. So the other employees that were on this subcommittee were the project engineer, the city engineer, and the purchasing manager. The firms were ranked on 11 criteria, and the firm that scored the highest was J. Volk Consulting. Their contract has 5 major areas. They're going to perform and analyze a geotech report, investigation of the location, both horizontally and vertically, of existing utilities and design new utilities. They're to prepare all the construction design documents and specifications, determine the need for any additional right-of-way, and analyze the roadway width, storm drain system, and potential medians for design options. Also, the consultant will investigate the elimination of concrete curb and gutter for the proposed wet roadway. That was brought up in a council meeting a while ago to at least look at that. During the course of negotiating a contract with J. Volk Engineering, we had a few rain events that showed that we have a rather large drainage problem just north of Meacham in this area. In fact, it floods Falcon Steel on occasion, and I put a letter from Falcon Steel and some photos in your packet. So in negotiating the agreement that we set up with J. Volk, if they are to do the entire project, the engineering would be $324,000. If council decides just to award for Meacham Boulevard only, it's $288,000. So that is a difference of $36,000 would be the engineering required to analyze and design improvements for this intersection. Preliminarily, from looking at it, it appears that the construction just to solve those drainage improvements would be around $220,000. However, the way the contract is structured, it probably wouldn't go to construction. It will not go to construction until sometime next fiscal year. So there's probably a way to go ahead and afford it if council decides to award the project for the $324,000 instead of $288,000. Because it is a known drainage problem and it's existed for years, it is staff's recommendation that we do include it with the contract. If you have any questions, I would be happy to address them. Mr. Tom Dayton with J. Volk Engineering is here as well, and if you stump me, perhaps you won't stump him.
Councilman McGrow.
Hey, Greg. On the drainage issues, would that qualify under the stormwater? So we could use stormwater funds for that drainage?
Yes, but I don't think the drainage fund collects enough money to pay for all the cost of the drainage improvements, but that would be one funding source that we'd like to use.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Grow. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Greg. One quick question. With all the construction going on at the end of Old Denton Road in Meacham there with the railroad, the rail line going through, is that just about over with? And the reason I ask is, I know they've had heavy equipment in there and they've been using all of the streets, roadways going. Is that over with so that we're not going to put this brand new road in and immediately?
If it's not over with, it's very close. Okay. So by the time we go to construction, it should be complete.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Ms. Thompson.
As far as the road is concerned, there's a lot of, as you say, commercial traffic through there, big trucks and things of that nature. Are we considering the quality of the materials used in the road as well?
Yes, not only the quality, but our typical design section for this type of area is somewhere around 8 inches thick of concrete. Standard residential, to give you an idea, is 6 inch. I think preliminarily the engineering firm is thinking that it's going to take somewhere around 11-inch thick concrete section. So it's going to be a much more substantial section.
Yes.
And of course, what we have there now is asphalt.
Right. And if you drive through there, and I'm sure everybody on council has, the potholes in the road and the dirt and the mud and everything comes through because of the tight road, I'm sure that's there. It was probably, at that time, it was not meant to take on the kind of traffic it's had.
Councilmember Rowe.
I guess all the, because we have, I guess Tyson now, a state fair for hot dog, or a state fair, corny dogs. Falcon Steel, who are, I guess we're gonna have like a mitigation plan, because they're not gonna be able to move as efficiently once construction starts. So we looked at.
No, they won't. But one advantage we have, being that the pavement section is wide as it is, that we can probably construct half the street.
Okay. And
be able to maintain two-way traffic. The key, I think, is going to be for their driveway approaches to make sure they have a large enough turning radius.
Yeah, because it's going to be incredibly altered.
Exactly.
Because they're going to have
So there will be some leave-outs, for certain time periods to make sure they always have access.
And I know Falcon Steel's aware of it. I guess it's Tyson that owns State Fair. They're aware of it. Medtronic's aware of it. And
as we get closer, we'll go ahead and make them all aware. Like I said, because I want to be able to evaluate, the curb and gutter situation, the medians, so that when I go to them, I can have a little bit more of a plan involved.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions or comments from the council for Greg? Seeing none. Excellent presentation. Thank you, sir. We are in line for a motion. Councilmember Weist.
Motion for RFQ 2018-312-002. Make a motion that we approve the engineering agreement for $324,000 with J-Vote Consulting for the Meacham Boulevard reconstruction project, which will include the design of the drainage improvements around the intersection of Old Denton Road and Meacham Boulevard, and authorize the city manager to execute the corresponding engineering agreement.
Thank you, sir. A motion for approval. Councilmember Nunn.
Thank you. That's for a second.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion for approval in a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if you would please register your votes. Motion passes unanimous. Number 9, assignment of various projects. Consideration and/or action to approve an assignment of an existing engineering agreement and to award an engineering agreement for various water and sanitary sewer projects.
Good evening once again. On this last item before you, a little background. In 2010, the city entered into an engineering agreement with Gary Burton Engineering for a variety of professional design services for infrastructure replacement throughout the city. In 2013, the city entered into a follow-up agreement which identified the specific water and sewer rehab or replacement projects that I've indicated in the cover sheet. Since that 2013 agreement, Gary Burton Engineering has been bought out by CP&Y, which used to be Chain Patel and Yerby. Additionally, the engineering agreements that were entered into in 2013 only covered the design phases. Our typical contracts, just like the last one that was presented to you with J. Volk, include the design, the bidding phase, and when we need them during the construction phase. Because we have construction inspectors on staff and engineers on staff, we don't use construction administration maybe as much as some of the other cities do. However, there are times when we do need the engineer's advice because he's the individual that designed the project. So currently all projects that are indicated on my cover sheet are probably about 95% complete with design. So they're fairly close to being ready to go out for bid and then constructed. So it would be appropriate to enter into an engineering agreement with the firm that bought out Gary Burton Engineering. Again, that would be CP&Y. So in this cover sheet, I'm asking council to do two things: to approve the assignment, acknowledging that CP&Y is now the owners of Gary Burton Engineering, and number two, to enter into an engineering agreement for $100,930 to cover both the bidding phase and the construction phase for the 6 projects that are indicated. If y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Miss Donna Renner with CP&Y is also in attendance, and she could also answer any questions about the project in the event that I cannot.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any questions for Greg? Are there any questions regarding this agenda item? Councilmember Thompson.
Okay, the additional monies that we're talking about, the $930. Okay, since we did not know that the Gary Burton division was bought out at the time we did our budget, how will we be paying for this?
So what I looked at, since we typically pay for design, bidding, and construction, I looked at to see normally that amount compared to the overall construction amount is somewhere around 15%, depending on the complexity of the project. If it's a real straightforward project, it might be closer to 12 or 13. If it's not so straightforward, a much more technologically project, for instance, a lift station design, it might be closer to 16, 17%. So what I looked at, thinking that that might be a question, was the overall construction cost is somewhere around 1.5 million. So if you add up the total engineering services being at 368,000, I believe that falls at like 12%. So it is, had we bid this, or not bid, you don't bid out engineering, but had we negotiated a contract up front for everything, this is in the range where I would have expected it to have been.
Okay, so we have this basically covered with the 1.5 million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Are there any other questions from the council for Greg? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Greg. We are in line for a motion. Everybody jump in at once.
Nobody likes Griggs.
Dr. Strong.
Mayor and Council, I would like to make a move to approve an assignment of an existing engineering agreement and to award an engineering agreement for various water and sanitary sewer projects.
Thank you, Dr. Strong. So we have a motion for approval. Councilmember Thompson.
That would be for a second.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion for approval in a second. If you would, please register your votes. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you, council, and thank you, Greg. We don't have any staff reports, so going on to agenda item number 11, future agenda items. Councilmember Weiss, we have on here at a future date. You want to do it at the next meeting or at a different? Okay, so we'll continue that one. Councilmember Grove, city attorney review. You want that to be placed on the February 25th
Correct.
meeting? Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. Is there anything else from anyone else that you want to have? Nothing? Okay. So we'll have, on the February 25th meeting, we'll have the city attorney review. Moving on to resignation of board members, we have two. We have Chris Bethel from the Planning and Zoning Commission and Scott Barlow from the CCPD Red Light Camera Advisory Board. If you, if you would just, we need a motion to approve these resignations. Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead and just, yeah, you can go ahead and vote. Bob? Bob? Okay, resignations have been approved. And appointments or reappointments? Councilmember Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two appointments I would like to make.
Okay.
Do you want me to do them separately or together?
You can do them together.
Okay. To CCPD, I would like to place Matthew Schoonover in that position, and for P&Z, Larry Henschel.
Okay. So if you would, council, we have recommendations for two people for the CCPD and also the Planning and Zoning. If you would, please ratify with your votes. Okay. Approved unanimous. Are there any other appointments or reappointments? Dr. Trump?
Ms. Camacho,
Yeah.
what section need the people for the members? P&Z still need one more or what? Yeah? Yes or no?
Dr. Tron, what you have listed on yours, those are people if you just want to reappoint. All these people are still on there, you just haven't reappointed them. That's pretty much on your 3 listings there for place 7. If you're going to reappoint them, that's what it is.
One of them?
They're all still active, they just haven't been reappointed. Their term is terminated. So if you want to reappoint all 3, just read it out.
Do I have to know the name of them?
It's right here on this.
It's on the memorandum, Dr. Tron, the front page.
If you want to approve your reappointments, you can do that.
Madam Council, I would like to reappoint the current member for Red Light Camera, Patty Street, Pie, Sue Austin, P&Z, Suzette T. 3 of them,
Those are reappointments. Okay, thank you, Dr. Trong. And council, if you would please ratify the appointments with your votes. Bob? Oh, I'm sorry, Brent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't, you know.
Okay. Yeah, went past unanimous. Are there any others? Well, I have 2. And these applications are on file for the Beautification Board. Garrett Schleier, I probably mispronounced the name, but his application is on file for the Beautification Board. And for the Civil Service Commission, I spoke with this person here also, Jonathan Thomas. Their application also is on file.
Jonathan Thomas, you want to appoint?
Civil Service Commission.
Civil Service.
Yeah, Jonathan D. Thomas Sr.
Okay.
Do you see it back there? Okay. Yeah. I spoke with him, very well qualified. So if you would please, council, vote for that ratification.
It's unanimous. Okay.
Okay, thank you, council. So with that being said, we have
Anyone else?
no absences to excuse, and we have no executive session, so we will adjourn at, oh, before we go, I do want to thank Councilmember Watkins for sharing his birthday evening with us. I want to thank you for that, Bob.
Please keep me saying happy birthday.
Oh, I thought you were going to lead it, no?
We're gonna light the candles, but we would have been a
Yeah.
fire alarm.
Yeah, today is Councilmember Watkins' birthday. Want to wish him a happy birthday and hope many more. And
May I,
thank you for
do
sharing.
we have to sing a happy birthday song? No? Okay.
With that, we'll adjourn at 9:25.